The day my family told me I had no right to my aunt's land, they also handed me the bill for her funeral and said it was only fair. It was a Tuesday morning, just after 9, and we were sitting at the long table in her lawyer's office, the coffee already cold. They spoke calmly, like this was routine paperwork, like I wasn't being erased in real time. My cousin kept tapping a pen with a cracked cap against the table, once every few seconds. Then the attorney stopped flipping pages and looked directly at me. That was when I realized everything I thought I knew about my family, and my place in it, was about to fall apart. The day my family told me I had no right to my aunt's land, they also handed me the bill for her funeral and said it was only fair. It was a Tuesday morning, just after 9, and the air in the lawyer's office smelled like stale coffee and lemon cleaner. The building sat off a service road outside Asheville, the kind of place with beige carpet, framed landscapes, and a receptionist who never looked up from her screen. I'd driven in from my apartment in Charlotte before sunrise, still wearing the black slacks I'd slept in because I couldn't stand the idea of wasting time changing clothes. My eyes felt gritty from crying in the dark the night before, but I'd told myself I could keep it together. I'd told myself this meeting would be sad, not humiliating. They were already there when I walked in. My cousin Brent sat with his shoulders spread wide like he owned the chair. His wife, Kayla, had her phone angled slightly toward her face, thumb moving in small, practiced strokes. My uncle Walt, my aunt's older brother, stood at the window staring down at the parking lot like he was waiting for someone to back him up. And across the table, my mother, Renee, sat with her purse in her lap and her hands locked around the straps so tight her knuckles looked pale. No one stood to hug me. No one said, "How are you holding up?" They just watched me find a seat, the way people watch a stranger take the last chair in a crowded waiting room. Mr. Halloway, my aunt's attorney, gave me a polite nod. He was a thin man with silver hair and a tie that looked like it had been chosen years ago and never replaced. There was a neat stack of folders in front of him, a legal pad, and a little brass nameplate that said Halloway and Finch. He had a paper cup of coffee by his elbow that had gone untouched long enough for the lid to sink slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Parker," he said. "My name is Claire Parker. I'm 31. I work as an environmental compliance auditor for a regional firm, mostly boring work, mostly paperwork, mostly driving out to job sites to confirm that people are following the rules they swear they're following. I'm the person companies call when they want to prove they're doing things right, and the person they hate when they aren't. I'm not rich. I don't own designer anything. I have a decent car with a cracked corner on the windshield because I keep putting off fixing it. And until 6 days ago, I had an aunt who always picked up the phone on the second ring. My aunt's name was Marlene. She wasn't the family matriarch in the way people picture it. She didn't host holiday dinners with matching plates and a centerpiece. She didn't post smiling photos on Facebook. She wore muddy boots, drove an old truck, and kept a jar of peppermints in the cup holder that always tasted like wintergreen and dust. She owned land out in Madison County, a big stretch of woods and pasture that had been in our family for decades, and she ran it like it mattered. Not because it was an asset, but because it was hers and it was alive. When she died, I expected grief. I expected my chest to ache. I expected the quiet, blunt weight of it. I didn't expect my own family to treat her death like a clearance sale. Mr. Halloway slid a document across the table toward me. It was a printed invoice, itemized, with the funeral home's logo at the top and a total at the bottom that made my stomach drop. I stared at it, blinking hard. "What is this?" I asked. Kayla exhaled a short laugh without looking up from her phone. "It's the bill," she said, like I'd asked what day it was. My Uncle Walt finally turned away from the window. His jaw was tight, his cheeks slightly red, the way they got when he was trying to keep his temper under control for appearances. "Marlene wanted a proper burial," he said. "We?" I repeated. Brent tapped his pen against the tabletop. The cap was cracked, and every tap made a small, sharp sound, like a click from a cheap remote. "I put it on my card," he said. "But it's family business. You were close to her. You should cover your part." "My part," I said, tasting the words. "I wasn't asked. I wasn't even told what you planned." My mother's eyes flicked toward me, then away, like she couldn't stand to hold my gaze. Kayla finally set her phone down and leaned forward. She had perfect nails, glossy and pale, and when she rested her fingertips on the table, it looked like she was posing for a photo. "Claire, don't make this weird," she said. "It's already done. We're just being fair." The word fair landed like a slap. I swallowed, fighting the heat rising behind my eyes. I paid for my flight back when you texted me she was in the hospital, I said. I took off work. I drove out there twice a week for months. Walt cut me off with a short, dismissive wave. That's not what this is about, he said. This is about responsibility. Brent slid another piece of paper toward me. It was a separate document, a single page with a header that said Family Agreement in bold letters. There were lines for signatures. My name was typed at the bottom like it was already assumed I'd comply. I looked at Mr. Holloway. What is this meeting? I asked him. I thought this was to go over Marlene's will. It is, he said carefully. His eyes flicked to Walt, then back to me. But your family requested we settle certain arrangements first. Art. Walt leaned his hands on the back of his chair, looming just enough to make the room feel smaller. There's been a lot of stress, he said, and a lot of expenses. The land taxes, upkeep, all that. My chest tightened at the way he said her name, like it tasted bitter. Brent pushed the invoice closer. Just sign, he said. Then we can get on with it. I didn't touch the papers. My fingers stayed curled in my lap, nails digging into my palm. What arrangements? I asked. Kayla answered before anyone else could. The land, she said. The trust. The royalties. Whatever Marlene had going on out there. She said, royalties, with a little lift of her eyebrows, like it was gossip. I felt my throat go dry. Royalties? Brent's mouth twisted. Don't play dumb, he said. You've been sniffing around that place for years. I visited my aunt, I said. My voice came out low, steady, even though my heart was thudding like it wanted out of my ribs. I brought her groceries. I fixed her mailbox. I sat with her in the kitchen while she drank her tea and told me what the creek looked like after the last storm. I wasn't sniffing. Walt made a sound in his throat that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so cold. You always make it sound like you're some kind of saint, he said, but we know what this is. Marlene got old. She got lonely. And you were around. You think that earns you something? My mother flinched, barely. Her hands tightened on her purse strap. I looked at her. Mom, I said softly, because part of me still believed she would step in if I gave her a chance. Her lips parted. For a second, I saw something like pain flash across her face. Then her shoulders sank, like her body had decided for her. Claire! She started, voice thin. Kayla jumped in again, fast, smooth. Your mom's grieving, she said. Don't put her in the middle. In the middle. Like I was the one creating a situation where my own mother had to choose whether to stand up for me. Mr. Holloway cleared his throat. If I may, he said, and everyone paused, just enough for the power in the room to shift toward him. He opened the top folder, flipped to a page, and adjusted his glasses. Marlene Parker's will is dated April 3rd of this year, he said. It was executed in my office with witnesses. It's valid. Walt's posture eased slightly, like he assumed that meant he'd won. Brent glanced at me, eyes flat. See? He said. Mr. Holloway continued. Now, before we proceed, I need to confirm that all interested parties are present. Everyone who matters is here. Walt said. Mr. Holloway's eyes stayed on the paper. His voice didn't change, but something in the cadence did. According to the documents Marlene filed, he said, the controlling interest in the Marlene Parker Conservation Trust, including land management authority and revenue distribution rights, transfers to one individual upon her death. Brent's pen stopped tapping. Kayla's smile held, but only at the edges. Walt's chin lifted. Yes, he said, confident. That would be me as next of kin. Mr. Holloway looked up then, directly at Walt, then at Brent, then at my mother, and finally at me. He slid a single page out of the folder and placed it on the table so it faced me. Miss Parker, he said. That individual is you. For a moment, nobody spoke. The office seemed to go quiet in a way that felt physical, like the air had thickened. I stared at the page. My name was printed there in plain black letters. Claire Parker. Beneath it, language I recognized from 100 compliance documents, specific, clinical, impossible to argue with if you understood what it meant. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Kayla's chair scraped slightly as she shifted. That can't be right, she said, still calm, still trying to keep the tone light, like she could laugh it off. Walt's face changed. The red in his cheeks drained, then rushed back hotter. "No," he said, voice sharp. "No, that's not what we discussed." Brent reached across the table, hand out like he was going to snatch the paper. Mr. Holloway placed 2 fingers on it, not forceful, just final. "I'm going to ask everyone to slow down," he said. "Because what I'm seeing here," he added, and his eyes flicked to the papers my family had tried to push at me, "doesn't match what you've been telling her." My pulse hammered so hard it made my ears ring. I could taste metal at the back of my tongue. All I could think was that I'd been sitting in my aunt's kitchen 3 months ago, watching her stir honey into tea with a small spoon, and she'd been so steady, so normal, like there was all the time in the world. And now my family was staring at me like I'd pulled a gun on the table. Walt leaned forward, hands planted flat, and when he spoke, his voice had dropped into something tight and dangerous. "Claire," he said, "you need to understand what you're messing with. There is misting." I looked down at the paper again, at my name, at the words that didn't feel real yet, and I felt the first crack form in everything I thought I knew about Marlene's death, about this meeting, about why they'd been so eager to make me sign anything before the will was even read. Because if this was true, if she'd left me control, then the funeral bill wasn't about being fair. It was about putting a leash on me before I even knew I had something worth fighting for. Walt's words hung in the air like a threat you could taste. "You need to understand what you're messing with." I didn't answer him right away, because I was trying to get my body to cooperate. My hands had gone cold. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was thumping against my throat. I kept my eyes on the page in front of me, on my name printed in clean, impersonal type. It wasn't sentimental. It wasn't poetic. It was the kind of language people use when they want things to hold up under pressure. Mr. Holloway reached over and gently pulled the invoice and the family agreement away from me, stacking them to the side like they were clutter. "We're going to proceed in the proper order," he said. "And I'm going to be clear. No private agreement has legal weight unless it aligns with the trust documents and the will." Brent's nostrils flared. "So you're saying we wasted our time?" "I'm saying, Mr. Holloway replied, voice steady, "that trying to collect money from Miss Parker before she's even been informed of her legal standing is inappropriate." Kayla gave a small, tight smile. "Inappropriate," she repeated, like she was tasting the word, deciding whether to be offended by it. My mother finally spoke, and her voice sounded like it had to squeeze through a doorway too small. "Claire, what does that mean?" she asked. I looked at her then. Really looked. Her mascara was slightly smudged under her eyes. She'd worn the same black cardigan she wore to church funerals and to court dates and to family dinners where she wanted to look respectable. Her hand still gripped her purse strap like it was the last thing keeping her upright. "It means," I said slowly, "Aunt Marlene put my name on something important." Walt snorted. "She didn't," he said. "This is a mistake." Brent leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms like he was trying to remind himself of his size. "We all know why you were always out there," he said, too loud for the small room. "You played the long game." My cheeks burned, but I didn't let him see it. I'd spent my whole life learning how to keep my face neutral when people tried to get a reaction out of me. It was a skill you develop when your family treats your feelings like a weakness they can exploit. "You think my job is a game?" I asked. Brent rolled his eyes. "Not your job. Your act." Mr. Holloway closed the folder halfway and held up one hand. "Enough," he said. He looked at me. "Miss Parker, would you like a moment? We can take a short break." I shook my head. If I stood up, I wasn't sure my knees would hold, and I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of watching me wobble. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice didn't sound like mine. Mr. Holloway nodded once. "All right," he said. "Then I'm going to read the will and summarize the trust transfer. After that, we can discuss next steps privately." Walt's stare drilled into me. My cousin's pen started tapping again, cracked cap, small clicks, like a metronome for my anxiety. Kayla's phone buzzed on the table, and she silenced it without looking, like nothing in the room was worth her full attention. "Mr. Holloway began reading in a calm, legal tone, but my mind kept snagging on one thought. Marlene knew. She knew what they'd do the second she was gone. She knew they'd try to box me in, shame me, scare me, make me sign something before I even understood what I was signing. And she had set a trap not to hurt them, but to reveal them. The thing about my family is that they've always believed the loudest person in the room is the most correct. Walt was loud. Brent was loud. Kayla was loud in a quieter way, smiles, social connections, the kind of confidence that made other people doubt themselves. I wasn't loud. I was the one who showed up, did the work, paid my own bills, kept my head down. That made me suspicious to them. It always had. I wasn't raised with the idea that money made you safe, but my mother was. She came from the side of the family that treated appearances like oxygen. Walt and Marlene were her older siblings. Walt had stayed close to the family machine. He'd gone into real estate, talked about portfolio, like it was a religion, and married into a circle of people who called vacations, trips, and looked down on anyone with dirt under their nails. Marlene, on the other hand, had married young, lost her husband early, and never let the rest of them turn her into a social project. She bought land out in the mountains when nobody wanted it, when it was just a patchwork of old pasture and hardwoods and one rundown barn. She made it into something real, something protected. She didn't have kids, which became its own kind of family sin. When Brent was born, Walt took it as proof that his line would continue, and Marlene's wouldn't. He liked saying things like, "Family property needs a family to carry it." Marlene never argued. She'd just look at him with that calm expression that made people feel exposed, and then she'd go back to what she was doing. When I was a teenager, she was the only adult who didn't treat me like a mistake waiting to happen. My mother tried, "I'll give her that," but she was always distracted by the fear of being judged. She was always glancing toward Walt at family gatherings, gauging whether she was doing enough to be accepted. Marlene didn't do that. Marlene would pull me aside, hand me a plate of food, and say, "Eat." Ignore them. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 17. Walt's house smelled like turkey and expensive candles. Brent had just gotten his driver's license and was showing off a new truck that Walt had helped him buy. Everyone was laughing at his stories. I was in the corner in a thrift store sweater, pretending I wasn't embarrassed. Walt's wife, my aunt by marriage, looked me up and down and said, "Claire, honey, you still doing that little science thing?" I'd started talking about environmental studies then. I'd been excited. I'd wanted to work in water quality, in conservation. I'd wanted to do something that felt honest. "It's not a little thing," I'd said, quietly. Brent laughed, a sharp bark, and said, "She wants to save the frogs." Everyone chuckled like it was harmless. Marlene had been standing behind me without me noticing. She set her hand on my shoulder. Not gently, not aggressively, just present. "If she wants to save frogs," she said, "then she'll do more good than most of you." The room had gone tight and offended for a second. Then the laughter resumed, but it had shifted. Because Marlene was the one person in the family you couldn't push too far without feeling like you were the villain. That was the dynamic for years. Walt ran the family like a business. Marlene existed slightly outside his reach, and I stayed close to her because she was the only place I didn't have to perform. When I graduated college, Marlene came alone. She sat in the bleachers in a sun hat with a bottle of water and clapped like she was proud enough for 10 people. Walt sent a text. My mother cried and said she wished my father could have seen it, even though my father was alive and simply not invited to most family functions because he made Walt uncomfortable. He was a high school shop teacher with calloused hands and a habit of saying exactly what he thought. Walt hated that. He hated anything he couldn't polish. I worked my way into my career the slow, boring way: field work, certifications, long hours, steady promotions. I didn't have connections. I didn't have a family friend offering me a job. I had a beat-up laptop, a decent brain, and the willingness to show up in the rain to take samples nobody wanted to pay for. Marlene loved it. She'd call and ask me questions about sediment runoff and buffer zones like it was thrilling. She'd say, "People think land is just dirt. It's not. It's a system." Over the last 2 years, her health started slipping in small, frustrating ways. She'd get winded walking from her truck to the barn. She'd forget she'd told me something and then laugh it off. She kept saying she was fine. She kept saying she didn't want the family turning her into an event. Then one day she called me and her voice sounded thinner. "Walt's been out here," she said. My stomach had tightened instantly. "Why?" "He says he's worried," she replied. "He brought papers." "Papers for what?" There was a pause. I could hear wind through the phone, the faint squeak of an old porch swing. "He says he wants to help me get things organized," she said. "He says it would be easier if someone else handled the finances." "And do you want that?" I asked. "No," she said plainly. "But he's persistent." That was how it started. Not with yelling, not with a dramatic fight. With persistence. With help. With the slow creep of someone trying to position themselves as the solution to a problem they were quietly creating. When Marlene went into the hospital, I drove out the same day. Walt texted me hours later, saying, "Visiting hours are limited. Don't overwhelm her." I remember sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, staring at that message, feeling something cold spread through my chest. It wasn't concern. It was control. And now here we were, in a lawyer's office, with a funeral bill shoved at me like a punishment, and a trust document with my name on it like a match struck in a dark room. Mr. Holloway finished reading and closed the folder. "The immediate effect," he said, "is that Miss Parker becomes the acting trustee and decision-maker for the Conservation Trust assets. That includes land management, revenue distribution, and oversight of existing agreements." Walt's voice came out low and sharp. "Agreements," he said. "What agreements?" Mr. Holloway looked down at his notes. "Timber rights were restricted. There's a conservation easement. There are also mineral lease negotiations Marlene suspended last year." Brent's eyes narrowed. "Mineral," he repeated, like he'd just smelled blood. Kayla's calm smile faltered for the first time. It was brief, but I saw it. A crack. Walt turned to me, and his face settled into something that wasn't quite anger yet, but was heading there fast. "You don't know what you're doing," he said. "You're going to ruin this." Eniclode. I forced myself to breathe. "I don't even know what this is yet," I said. "That's the point," Brent snapped. "You don't know. You're not equipped. You're just—" "Claire," my mother whispered, and this time her voice held more fear than guilt. "Please, just be careful. Be careful. Not be brave. Not, I'm on your side. Be careful. Like the danger was me." Mr. Holloway gathered his papers, stacking them with practiced precision. "Miss Parker," he said, "I suggest we meet privately as soon as possible. There are documents you haven't seen yet." My pulse steadied just enough for my thoughts to sharpen. "What kind of documents?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just a fraction. The kind," he said, "your aunt instructed me to give you only after today because she believed your family would try exactly what they tried." Walt's chair scraped back. "No," he said, pointing a finger toward Mr. Holloway like he could intimidate him into rewriting reality. "We are not doing secrets. We are family." Mr. Holloway's face stayed neutral, but his eyes went colder. "Family," he repeated, "does not override legal instruction." And in that moment, watching Walt's control slip just slightly, I understood something that made my stomach twist. This meeting hadn't been their first move. It had been their second, which meant Marlene had made her first quietly, deliberately, and I was about to find out why. Mr. Holloway ended the meeting the way you end something that's already turned dangerous, by standing up first and making everyone else either follow the rules or look childish. He told Walt and Brent that any questions about the trust had to go through him and that no one was to contact the bank, the county clerk, or any third party on Marlene's behalf without written authorization from me. He said it in the same tone a principal uses when he's tired of parents arguing in the hallway. Walt tried to laugh it off. "This is absurd," he said, but his voice was too tight to sell it. "Claire's in shock. She doesn't understand any of this. We need to protect her from making mistakes." Protect. That word again. The same word people use when they want control to sound like kindness. Mr. Holloway looked at me. "Miss Parker, would you like to leave first?" he asked. I nodded. My legs felt a little unsteady as I stood up, but I forced myself to move slowly, like I wasn't afraid of any of them. Kayla's eyes tracked me, the way a cashier watches a customer they suspect might shoplift. Brent's pen had stopped tapping. He was watching me now with a calculating stare, like he was rerunning the last 5 minutes in his head and looking for a way to undo it. My mother rose too, clutching her purse, and followed me into the hallway. The receptionist pretended not to notice any of it. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A wall clock ticked in a quiet, steady rhythm that made the whole place feel indifferent. "Claire," my mother said, her voice low, strained. "Can we talk?" I didn't stop walking. "We've been talking around things my whole life," I said. "Now's not the time." Her mouth tightened, and for a second she looked like she might actually say something honest. But then her eyes darted toward the conference room door, and the fear won. Walt is... He's going to be furious, she whispered. I stepped into the little lobby and pushed through the glass door into the cold air. He's already furious, I said. He's just trying to decide if he wants to hide it. Outside, the parking lot was bright with late morning sun. A line of pine trees behind the building cut the wind. My car sat between a black SUV with glossy paint and a white sedan with a dealer plate frame. I walked to my driver's side door, and my mother followed close enough that I could feel her anxiety like heat. Claire, she said again, softer this time. I'm scared. That stopped me. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. My mother didn't say things like that often. She survived by acting like fear was just another kind of weather, unpleasant, but manageable if you didn't talk about it. I turned and looked at her. Of what? I asked. She swallowed. Of what they'll do, she said. I stared at her for a beat. What makes you think they'll do anything? Her face shifted, a quick flicker of guilt, and I felt my stomach dip. Because, she said, they already have. Rever. Before I could ask what she meant, the conference room door opened behind us, and Walt stepped out. He moved fast, like he'd been waiting for us to be alone. Brent followed him, and Kayla came last, phone in hand like a shield. Walt stopped a few feet away from me, close enough for his voice to hit me like a shove. You're not leaving with that, he said. With what? I asked, keeping my hand on my car door handle. The idea that this is yours, he said. His eyes were hard and bright. You have no right. Mr. Halloway had said my name was on the trust documents. The ink was real. But Walt talked like words could change reality if you said them with enough conviction. It's not an idea, I said. It's paperwork. Brent's smile was thin. Paperwork can be challenged, he said. People contest this kind of thing all the time. Kayla stepped forward and adjusted her blazer like she was about to speak to a customer service manager. Claire, she said sweetly, you don't want this responsibility. You don't even live out there. You have your city job, your little apartment, your lifestyle. She let the last word hang like it meant something dirty. Let Walt handle it. That's what Marlene would have wanted. I felt my jaw clench so hard it hurt. Don't tell me what she wanted, I said. You weren't there. Walt's voice sharpened. We were her family, he snapped. So am I said. He leaned in slightly. Then act like it, he said. Pay the funeral bill. Sign the agreement. Stop making a scene. I looked at the invoice still in his hand. The corner of it crumpled from how tightly he was gripping it. That agreement, I said, wasn't legal. Mr. Halloway said so. Walt's lips pulled back, not quite a smile. Lawyers say a lot of things, he said. But life doesn't run on technicalities, Claire. People do. And you're not going to outmaneuver me. There it was. Not grief, not family. A game. My mother let out a small sound behind me, like she'd been holding her breath and couldn't anymore. Walt, she said quietly. Please. He didn't even look at her. Stay out of it, Renee, he said. You always do. That was the moment something in me cooled. Not softened, cooled. I'd spent years thinking the way to survive my family was to keep peace, to avoid conflict, to show I was reasonable. But reasonable people still get crushed when they're surrounded by people who don't care about reason. I opened my car door and got inside. My hands shook as I put the key in the ignition, and I hated that. I hated that my body was betraying how rattled I felt. I turned the key anyway. Walt stepped toward the front of my car, just enough to block me. He didn't touch the hood. He didn't slap the windshield. He just stood there, arms at his sides, calm, like he was forcing me to acknowledge him. You drive away, he said, and you'll regret it. I rolled my window down halfway. Move, I said. Brent leaned down near the passenger side, close enough that I could smell his cologne through the crack in the glass. You don't know what you're dealing with, he said. There are contracts. There are people involved. Marlene was old. She didn't understand everything she signed. She understood, I said, and I surprised myself with how sure my voice sounded. Kayla lifted her phone. If you keep acting like this, she said, I'm going to have to call someone. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was worse. It was the kind of threat that uses other people, police, doctors, neighbors, to make you look unstable. The kind of threat that makes you question whether anyone will believe you if you say what's happening. I stared at her. Call whoever you want, I said. Walt finally moved, but not because he respected me. Because Mr. Halloway had stepped into the doorway behind them and was watching. And Walt cared about witnesses. I backed out slowly, my tires crunching over gravel, and drove off with my heart pounding so hard it made the steering wheel feel like it was vibrating. The road back toward Charlotte blurred. I barely registered the billboards or the exits. My mind kept replaying the meeting. Walt's voice, Brent's smug certainty, Kayla's calm threats. Somewhere between Asheville and Hickory, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down and saw a text from my mother. Please be careful. They already changed things. I pulled off at the next gas station. My hands were sweating by the time I dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. What do you mean they changed things? The gas station smelled like gasoline and hot asphalt. A man in a ball cap was pumping diesel at the next pump, not paying attention. My mother inhaled shakily. Before Marlene got sick, she said, you could go out there whenever you wanted. You'd call her, you'd drive out, you'd help her. She always told me you were there. Yes, I said. My throat felt tight. But when she got worse, my mother continued, Walt started organizing. She said it like the word tasted wrong. He told me he was handling her paperwork. He said he was helping her. He started saying she was too tired for visitors, too confused. He told people to stop calling her directly. My stomach sank. I could see it so clearly now. Walt positioning himself as the gatekeeper, the interpreter, the responsible one. Did you believe him? I asked. There was a pause. Then, resent. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. The plastic was warm from the sun. What did he change? I asked, more sharply. He had the locks changed on her house, my mother said. The words hit me like a punch. What? He said it was for safety, she whispered. He said there were strangers coming around. He said Marlene's truck had been followed. He said she needed security. David. I thought of Marlene's old farmhouse, the worn key she kept on a hook by the door, the way she'd always told me. If I don't answer, just come in. You know where the mugs are. I remembered the last time I'd tried to go out there, 2 weeks before she died, when I'd driven up and found the porch light off and the front door locked. I'd knocked until my knuckles hurt. No one answered. My aunt's truck had been in the driveway, but the house felt dead. When I called her, it went to voicemail. When I called Walt, he texted back. She's resting. Don't disturb her. I'd believed it because I wanted to. Because it was unbearable to think someone was deliberately shutting me out. Claire, my mother said, voice breaking. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. My chest tightened. Did you ever actually see Marlene after the locks changed? I asked. Another pause. A longer one. No, my mother said, and the word sounded like a confession. I sat there, staring at the smeared windshield, my mind snapping pieces together that I hadn't wanted to connect. Locks changed. Access restricted. Information controlled. A funeral bill shoved in my face before the will was read. A family agreement drafted in advance. This wasn't grief making people act weird. This was a plan. I took a slow breath. Mom, I said. Did Marlene ever mention anything to you? Anything she was worried about? My mother sniffed, like she was wiping her nose. She called me once, she said. Late at night, a month before she went into the hospital. She sounded angry. She said, if something happens to me, don't let Walt touch my files. My skin prickled. What files? I asked. I don't know, my mother whispered. She didn't explain. She just said she'd left proof where it belongs. And then she hung up. Proof. Files. Left where it belongs. I looked up at the gas station convenience store, at the neon beer signs, at the lottery posters in the window. My life felt like it had slid sideways without warning, like the ground under me had shifted, and I was only just realizing I'd been standing on a trapdoor. Because if Marlene had left proof, that meant she'd expected this. And if she'd expected this, then the thing my family was trying to take wasn't just land. It was whatever she had built into that land, whatever agreements she'd made, whatever money flowed through it, whatever leverage she'd created that made Walt and Brent so desperate they were willing to threaten me in a parking lot. I ended the call with my mother and sat in the car for a full minute, breathing through the tightness in my chest until my hands stopped shaking. Then I opened my notes app and typed the one thing I knew I needed to do next. Go to Marlene's property. Find the files. Don't tell anyone. And as I pulled back onto the highway, a new thought settled in, cold and steady. If Walt had changed the locks, he'd assumed I'd stopped trying. He'd assumed wrong. I didn't go straight home to Charlotte. I drove east for another hour, then cut back north on smaller roads until the highway noise faded and the landscape changed from billboards and chain restaurants to trees and long stretches of quiet. Marlene's property sat outside a little mountain town, where the cell signal dropped in and out and people still waved at each other on two-lane roads. She used to joke that the land kept her honest because you couldn't fake your way through weather, mud, and time. By the time I turned onto her gravel driveway, it was mid-afternoon and the sun was low enough to throw long shadows between the oaks. The driveway curved past a line of fence posts and opened into a clearing with her old farmhouse on the left and the barn farther back. The house looked the same as it always had: white paint that had yellowed in spots, a porch swing that creaked in the wind, a metal rooster on the roofline that had been there for as long as I could remember. But the driveway didn't feel the same. There was a new gate. It wasn't fancy. Just a basic metal farm gate with a chain looped around it and a shiny padlock hanging from the chain like a warning. A small sign was zip-tied to the gate. Private property. No trespassing. The letters were crisp, printed, not handwritten. Like someone had gone out of their way to make sure it looked official. I parked on the shoulder and got out. The air smelled like pine and cold dirt. Somewhere in the woods, a bird called out, and it made the stillness feel even louder. I walked up to the gate and stared at the padlock. It was new enough that the metal still had that bright, untouched shine. Marlene never would have put a sign like that on her own gate. She didn't believe in keeping people out just to feel powerful. She believed in knowing who was on your land and why. I pulled my keys out and flipped through them even though I already knew none of them would fit. The key I'd had for years, Marlene's old brass house key, was gone. I'd looked for it last week, panicked, ripping through my purse and coat pockets, only to remember she'd told me months ago she'd changed her own locks because the key was getting worn. She'd said she'd give me the new one next time I came out. Next time never came. I wrapped my fingers around the padlock anyway, tested it, felt the solid resistance. There was no give. Whoever did this didn't expect me to get in. For a moment, I stood there feeling foolish and angry, like I'd driven all this way just to stare at a chain. The kind of anger that rises not from a single insult, but from years of being treated like you don't belong at your own table. Then I heard tires on gravel behind me. I turned as an old pickup rolled up slow and stopped a few yards back. The driver's window slid down and a man leaned out. He was in his late 60s, wearing a faded jacket and a ball cap. His face was weathered in that mountain way creases from sun and squinting. Not softness. "Claire?" he called. I blinked. "Yes," I said, cautious. He nodded once like that was enough confirmation. "It's Earl," he said. "Earl Givens. Doesn't Ernie Stadgen." It took me a second, then I remembered. Earl lived down the road. He'd helped Marlene fix fence lines after storms. He was the one who'd brought her tomato plants in the spring and refused to take money for them. He'd always been quietly around, like part of the landscape. "Earl," I said, relief and dread mixing. "Hi." He got out of the truck slowly and shut the door. "I saw your car," he said. And his eyes moved to the gate. "Figured you'd run into this." My throat tightened. "Walt did this," I said. It wasn't a question. Earl didn't answer right away. He walked up to the gate, leaned down, and looked at the chain like he was assessing a bruise. Then he straightened and looked at me with a flat, tired expression. "Your uncle's been real busy since Marlene went into the hospital," he said. I swallowed. "Busy how?" "Locks, signs, cameras," he said, ticking them off like chores. He had a guy come out and put one of those little doorbell cameras on the porch. Never seen Marlene use anything like that. He put another one on the barn corner. My skin prickled. "Cameras," I repeated. Earl nodded. Said it was for safety. Said there were trespassers. He made air quotes with 2 fingers like he didn't believe a word of it. "Truth is, nobody bothers this place. Everybody around here knows whose land it is." It was strange hearing him say it in the present tense. Whose land it is. Not was. I looked through the gate toward the farmhouse. I could just see the porch through the trees. The swing moved slightly in the wind. I imagined a small camera blinking silently from the corner of the frame, recording everything. A calm little detail floated through my head that didn't belong with the rest of my panic. The porch swing still had Marlene's red and white quilt folded over the back rail, like she'd left it there yesterday. Did he ever come out here with her? I asked. Earl shook his head. I never saw Marlene with him, he said. Saw him come in his own truck. Saw Brent, too. And a couple times, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Younger. Scrubs on. Could have been a nurse. My stomach turned. Marlene had a home health nurse, I said. But she didn't like strangers. She said she wanted her regular doctor, Earl shrugged. All I know is, after your uncle started showing up, Marlene stopped walking down to the mailbox, he said. She used to wave at me from the porch. Then, my throat ached. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Earl, I said, did Marlene ever leave anything with you? Any papers? Any key? He looked at me for a long second. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small keyring. It wasn't Marlene's old brass key. It was a plain silver key with a worn black plastic top. She asked me to hold this about a month before she went to the hospital, he said. She told me, if Claire comes out here and the place is locked up, give her this and don't ask questions. My breath caught. What does it go to? I asked. Earl looked toward the barn. Not the house, he said. It goes to that little storage room on the back side of the barn. The one she kept the records in. Records. Proof where it belongs. My pulse sped up again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was momentum. Thank you, I said, and my voice came out rough. Earl held the key out, but he didn't let go right away. I froze. What? He released the key into my palm. It was cold. Your uncle told me you weren't welcome, he said. Told me if I saw you, I should call him. I stared at him. Did you? I asked. Earl's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. No, he said. I told him I didn't see anything. A hard lump formed in my throat. It wasn't just gratitude. It was the sudden realization that even now, even here, Walt was trying to control what people thought of me. He'd been laying groundwork, poisoning the well. Earl nodded at the gate. I can open that chain for you if you want, he said. Bolt cutters. I looked at the padlock, then back at him. My instinct wanted to say yes, to cut it and drive up like I belonged there. But then I pictured Walt in court later, calling me reckless, destructive, unstable. I pictured Kayla's phone raised like a weapon. No, I said. Not yet. Earl's brows lifted slightly, like he respected that answer. There's an old access path around the side, behind the tree line. Marlene used it with her ATV sometimes. You can park down by my place and walk in if you don't want to be seen at the gate. I stared at him. Is that what you're telling me to do? I asked. He looked out at the woods. I'm telling you, he said. The land's still the land. I thanked him again, got back in my car, and drove down the road to Earl's house, parked behind his truck like we were doing something normal. Then I walked. The access path was narrow, overgrown in spots, and my shoes picked up damp leaves and mud. The air under the trees was cooler, and the ground felt soft. I kept my eyes moving, scanning not for animals, but for anything new, fresh tire tracks, disturbed brush, a camera hidden on a trunk. My mind kept flashing to Marlene, to her calling my mother late at night, to her voice angry and sharp. I imagined her sitting alone in her house, aware that Walt was circling, aware that she was losing strength. I imagined her deciding, quietly, to create a record because she knew nobody would protect me except herself. After 15 minutes, I reached the back edge of the clearing, where the barn stood. It was the same weathered structure with faded red boards and a tin roof that clicked when the wind hit it. I moved along the tree line, keeping low, feeling ridiculous and furious at the same time. I shouldn't have to sneak onto my aunt's property like a thief, but Walt had made sure that if I entered through the front, it would look like I was trespassing. On the barn's backside, there was a small door I'd never paid much attention to. It was half hidden by stacked old lumber and a rusted wheelbarrow. The door had a deadbolt with a keyhole. I slid Earl's key into it and turned. It clicked open smoothly, like it had been used recently. I pulled the door open and stepped inside. The smell hit me: first paper, dust, old wood, and something faintly metallic. The storage room wasn't big. A single bulb hung from the ceiling. Metal shelves lined the walls. Cardboard boxes sat stacked neatly, labeled in Marlene's handwriting: timber, taxes, easement, survey, lease talks. There was also a small gray file cabinet with a combination lock, the kind you'd see in a doctor's office. On a workbench near the back wall sat a manila envelope with my name written on it in thick black marker. Claire. No last name. No flourish. Just my name. Like she'd been in a hurry or like she didn't want anyone to misunderstand who it was for. My hands shook as I picked it up. It wasn't sealed with tape. It was held closed with a paper clip. I slid the clip off and opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a small USB drive taped to the page like Marlene didn't trust it not to disappear. The letter was only 1 page long, written in her handwriting, the lines slightly uneven, like her hand had been unsteady. I didn't read it yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because I suddenly felt exposed. Like the walls had ears. Like someone might walk in at any second and catch me with proof in my hands. I turned and looked back at the shelves, at the file cabinet, at the careful labels. This wasn't just land paperwork. This was a system, a map, a story she'd been building. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. One of the boxes had been opened recently. The tape was cut, and the flaps didn't sit right. Someone had been in here. Someone had been looking for this. I stood perfectly still, envelope clutched in my hands, listening to the silence of the barn. In the distance, wind moved through the trees. A branch creaked. Nothing else. But I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that Walt hadn't just changed locks. He'd been searching for what Marlene left behind. And now that I'd found it first, the version of this story my family had planned was about to break. I closed the storage room door behind me and turned the deadbolt back into place. Not because I thought it would stop anyone determined, but because it made my breathing slow down. The click of the lock was a small, concrete sound in a moment that felt unreal. The bulb overhead flickered once, then steadied. I set the envelope on the workbench and stared at it like it might bite me. My name in Marlene's handwriting looked wrong in that dusty little room, like a private message left in a place that was never meant to hold secrets. I pulled the letter out first. The paper was creased from being folded, and one corner had a faint smudge like her thumb had dragged ink. The handwriting was hers, blocky, practical. Not pretty, but the lines dipped and wavered in places, like her hand had been tired. Claire, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to hand you what I wanted to hand you. I'm sorry for that. I'm also sorry for what your uncle is going to try, because I know him. He thinks the world belongs to whoever grabs first. I had to stop there and swallow. The words were so Marlene, it hurt. No drama, no guilt trips. Just the plain truth spoken like a weather report. Do not sign anything they put in front of you. Not a bill, not an agreement, not a family understanding. They will try to make you feel ashamed or rushed. They will tell you you're overreacting. They will say you're being emotional. That's their favorite trick. I almost laughed, but it came out as a tight exhale through my nose. My chest felt hot and hollow at the same time. If Holloway is with you, listen to him. He's not perfect, but he respects paper and he respects me, and I chose him for a reason. He has copies of everything that matters. But what he doesn't have are the things I couldn't put in his office without your uncle sniffing them out. There was a pause in the handwriting there, a gap like she'd stopped to rest. I kept reading. In this room you'll find records. Some are boring, some are not. The USB has the important stuff. Do not plug it into a work computer. Use a personal laptop. If you don't have one you trust, go to the library and use one of their public machines, but don't leave the USB there. Your uncle likes to pretend he's subtle. He is not. I looked down at the USB drive taped to the paper and felt the weird weight of it. It was so small, so ordinary. Something you could lose in a couch cushion. Something my family would never take seriously until it ruined them. She wrote one more paragraph, and the handwriting got shakier. One more thing. There's a lockbox at First Mountain Bank in Marshall. Box 118. Key is in the gray cabinet. Combination is the day you were born. The lockbox has the original easement agreement and the revised trust addendum. Your uncle will tell you those don't exist. He is lying. If you do this right, he will have to pay for every time he shut you out. I sat down hard on the stool by the workbench because my legs suddenly felt too weak to hold me. Pay for every time he shut you out. Marlene had known. She hadn't just suspected. She had prepared. I held the letter in both hands and stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I forced myself to move. I reached for the gray file cabinet. It had a round combination dial and a small keyhole underneath. I tried the dial first, just to see if it was already open. It wasn't. The combination is the day you were born. My birthday is June 14. I spun the dial to 0, then carefully turned it 06, then 14, then back to 06 again, because I wasn't sure if it wanted month or day. My fingers were clumsy with nerves. On the second try, the lock gave with a soft clunk. Inside the cabinet was a small ring of keys held together by a zip tie and a laminated card with First Mountain Bank's logo on it. The keys were labeled in Marlene's handwriting. House. Truck. Lockbox. I stared at the lockbox key, a plain silver thing with a small notch, and felt a sharp sting behind my eyes. She'd set this up like she was leaving me directions to a safe. I tucked the keyring into my pocket and picked up the USB drive. It was the most normal thing in the room. Black plastic, a little metal connector, no label, no hint of what it held. I slid it into my jeans pocket and then made myself look around again. At the boxes, at the cut tape. Someone had been in here. Someone had been searching. My mind flashed back to the lawyer's office. Brent's sudden attention when mineral came up. Walt's angry certainty. Kayla's calm threat to call someone. The funeral bill shoved at me like a leash. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. I moved to the open box and pulled the flaps apart. Inside were file folders, neat stacks of documents, and a manila folder labeled Lee's Negotiations. The contents weren't scattered, but the folders weren't in the same order. Someone had flipped through them quickly, looking for one specific thing. I replaced the folders exactly as they were and pressed the flaps down, not bothering to retape. Then I picked up the envelope with the letter and carried it to my car as quietly as I could, slipping out of the tree line and back down the access path the way I'd come. I didn't go up to the house. I didn't step into the clearing where a camera might catch my face. I kept my head down and my pace steady. By the time I reached Earl's place, my shirt stuck to my back with sweat. Earl was on his porch, sitting in a metal chair with a cup of coffee. He watched me approach without moving. When I got close, his eyes flicked to my hands. Empty. Then to my face. "You found what you needed?" he asked. "I found something," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Thank you." He nodded like he didn't want details. Like he understood that the more he knew, the more he could be forced to say later. "You be careful," he said simply. "I will," I said. And I meant it in a way I hadn't meant it earlier when my mother told me the same thing. I drove back toward Charlotte, with the sun sinking behind the mountains. The light on the road turned coppery, and the shadows stretched across the lanes. The whole drive, I kept glancing at my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Walt's truck behind me, Brent's SUV, some car I didn't recognize. Nobody followed, but my body stayed tense anyway, like it didn't trust the quiet. At home, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't heat food. I kicked off my shoes, washed my hands, and went straight to my small desk in the corner of my living room, where my personal laptop sat. It was an old one, scratched and slow, but it was mine. No office monitoring, no shared networks. I hesitated with the USB in my hand. My heart was beating too fast again. I thought about Marlene's note. Do not plug it into a work computer. I thought about Walt and Brent's resources, their confidence, the way they acted like they could make things happen just by deciding they should. Then I inserted the USB. My laptop made a soft chime. A little window popped up on the screen. The drive name was MP. There were 3 folders inside. One was labeled Trust. One was labeled Bank. And one was labeled Video. My stomach clenched. I clicked the video folder. Inside were 5 files with dates as their names. The earliest was from 8 months ago. The latest was from 2 weeks before Marlene died. For a full 10 seconds, I just stared at the file names, my hand hovering over the mouse. My apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint traffic noise outside. My throat felt tight, like my body knew what I was about to see and didn't want me to. I clicked the earliest file. The video opened in a small player window. It was grainy, like it had been recorded on a cheap hidden camera. At first, all I saw was a section of Marlene's kitchen. Her worn linoleum floor, the lower cabinets with chipped paint, the legs of her old table, then voices. Walt's voice, unmistakable, smooth and annoyed. "Marlene, stop being stubborn. It's paperwork. Just sign it," Marlene's voice answered, quieter but firm. I'm not signing anything I don't understand. A chair scraped. Footsteps. The camera shifted slightly, like it had been placed inside something that vibrated when someone leaned on the table. Brent's voice came in, sharper. You don't need to understand every line. That's what lawyers are for. You're making this hard. Marlene's laugh was short and humorless. Funny, she said. You didn't care about making anything easy for me before you smelled money. The screen showed Walt's pant leg stepping into frame, close to the camera. He leaned down, and for a second his face appeared older than I remembered from childhood. But the same eyes. The same look of irritation disguised as concern. Marlene, he said, and his tone changed into something that made my skin crawl. You keep pushing, and you're going to end up with no one. There was a pause. Then Marlene said, very calmly. Walt didn't answer directly. He sighed like she was tiring him out. It's reality, he said. People get tired. People have lives. Don't make yourself a burden. My hands had curled into fists in my lap without me noticing. My nails dug into my palm. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Marlene's voice came again, steady. Get out of my house, she said. Brent scoffed. You can't even get to the mailbox without getting winded, he said. Don't act tough. And then, the video cut off abruptly, like someone had grabbed the device. I sat perfectly still, staring at the frozen frame of Marlene's kitchen floor. All day I'd been telling myself my family was just being ugly because grief made them selfish. But this wasn't grief. This was before she died. This was them leaning on her while she was alive, while she was vulnerable, while she was alone. I clicked the next video file with a shaking hand, already knowing that whatever I believed about my family, whatever I'd tried to excuse, whatever I'd tried to soften, was about to collapse into something much worse. The second video opened to a different angle, higher up this time, like the camera had been tucked on a shelf. Marlene's living room came into view, her faded couch, the quilt folded neatly over the arm, the big window that looked out toward the pasture. The timestamp in the corner showed a date from 5 months ago. Marlene was sitting in her recliner, a blanket over her legs. Her hair looked thinner than I remembered. She had a mug in her hand, but her fingers trembled enough that the tea inside rippled. Across from her, Kayla sat with her ankles crossed and a notebook on her lap, as if she were there to help organize Marlene's life. Walt stood behind Kayla, one hand on the back of the couch like he owned it. The sound was clear enough that I could hear the hum of Marlene's old ceiling fan. Kayla's voice was light, practiced. Marlene, we're just trying to make sure you're protected, she said. We've been reading about scams. People prey on older folks out here. Marlene stared at her. I know what scams look like, she said. Walt made a small laugh. Then you'll appreciate us stepping in, he said. Marlene's eyes shifted to him, and even through a grainy video I could see how tired she was of him. You didn't step in when my roof leaked, she said. You didn't step in when I was hauling hay by myself. You're stepping in now because you want something. Kayla's smile tightened. That's not fair, she said. We're family. Marlene's voice stayed calm. Family doesn't show up with documents and threats, she said. Walt's tone sharpened. Nobody threatened you, he said, but it sounded like a lie even to him. Kayla leaned forward slightly. Marlene, she said, we heard Claire's been out here a lot. We're concerned she's putting pressure on you. The way she said my name made my stomach twist. Not like a niece or a person. Like a problem. Marlene's gaze flicked toward the camera's direction. Not at it, just past it, like she was thinking. Walt stepped forward, and his voice dropped into that same tone I'd heard in the parking lot. Controlled. Dangerous. Marlene. He said, you're not thinking clearly. You're isolating yourself. You've been forgetting things. It's time we got a professional involved. A professional, Marlene repeated. A doctor, Kayla said quickly. Or someone who can evaluate you. Marlene stared at them both. And then she said something that made my throat close up. You mean you want to declare me unfit? She said. Silence. A long one. Then Walt sighed like she'd made it dramatic. If that's what it takes to keep the trust safe, he said. Yes. I felt my skin go cold as I watched it. The word safe again. The way they used it to justify taking someone's agency. The way they used it to make themselves sound like the heroes in their own story. Marlene didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just said, get out. Again. And the video ended. I sat back in my chair so slowly it felt like my body was moving through water. The room around me, my apartment, my lamp, the half-empty water glass looked normal, but I didn't feel normal. I felt like I'd stepped into a version of my life where the people who were supposed to be family were calmly discussing how to strip an old woman of her rights. I clicked the third video. This one was short. The camera was shaky, like it had been moved. The picture showed Marlene's front porch from an angle near the doorframe. The doorbell camera, Earl had mentioned, maybe, or something similar. The timestamp was from 2 months ago. I watched Brent walking up the porch steps, carrying a cardboard box. Walt followed behind him with a clipboard. A woman in scrubs trailed them. Blonde hair pulled back. A stethoscope looped around her neck. She didn't look like a neighbor. She looked like someone paid to be there. Brent knocked, then tried the doorknob. It didn't open. He knocked again. Louder. He leaned down and spoke toward the camera. "Marlene?" he said, voice falsely cheerful. "We brought your nurse." "Open up." There. There was no answer. Walt leaned into frame. "Marlene," he said, louder. "We know you're inside." Still nothing. The woman in scrubs shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Parker," she said, "if she's refusing care, we can't force." Walt cut her off. "She's confused," he said. "She doesn't know what she's doing." He turned toward the camera again and said, clearly, "If you don't open the door, we'll have to call someone to do a welfare check." A welfare check. My stomach lurched, because I could see it now. The script, the setup, the calm, reasonable relatives, concerned about an elderly woman, and the inconvenient niece who kept showing up and asking questions. They'd been laying a track for months. The video ended with Brent jiggling the doorknob again and Walt making a call. I couldn't hear the call, but I could imagine it. I didn't click the fourth video right away. I stared at the file name, dated 3 weeks before Marlene died, and my hands started shaking again. I thought about that day I'd driven out and found the door locked, the porch quiet, the house dead. I thought about the sickening feeling in my gut as I knocked and wondered if she was inside listening, too weak to come to the door. Had there been a welfare check? Had there been strangers in her house? Had Walt used that to justify changing the locks, installing cameras, putting up signs, pushing me out? I clicked the fourth video. This one didn't show Walt. It showed Marlene in her kitchen, sitting at the table. Marlene's face was closer to the lens than before. Her eyes looked glossy, angry. There was a man's voice off camera different from Walt's, younger, professional, flat. "Ma'am," the voice said, "your brother is concerned about you. We're here to make sure you're safe." Marlene's laugh was sharp, bitter. "I'm safe," she said. "I'm annoyed. Are you alone?" the man asked. Marlene looked straight past the camera. "No," she said. "You're in my house." The man didn't laugh. "We have to ask certain questions," he said. "Do you feel threatened by anyone?" There was a pause, and I could hear Marlene inhale slowly, like she was making a decision. "Yes," she said. My heart slammed into my ribs. "By who?" the man asked. Marlene's voice stayed calm. "By the people who keep showing up with papers and calling strangers to my door," she said. "By the people trying to turn my life into a courtroom." There was movement off camera. The man cleared his throat. "Do you mean your brother?" "I mean Walt," Marlene said. Silence again. Then the man said, more carefully, "Do you have anyone you trust who can assist you?" Marlene's voice softened, just a little. "My niece," she said. "Claire," the man asked. "Is she here?" "No," Marlene replied. Because Walt made sure she wouldn't be. The video ended with a scrape, like someone had shifted the camera, and then darkness. I sat there with my mouth open, the air stuck in my throat. My hands were numb. I felt sick. Not just because of what they'd done, but because of how close I'd been to seeing it and refusing to see it. Marlene had been trying to tell me. She'd asked me to get the box, the files. She'd been laying a trail. And Walt had been cutting me off 1 inch at a time until I couldn't reach her at all. I forced myself to click the final video, the one dated 2 weeks before she died. The screen showed Marlene's porch again, night this time. The porch light was on, casting a small circle of yellow. The camera angle was steady. Marlene's front door opened, and she stepped out slowly, holding onto the frame. She looked thinner, fragile, in a way that made my chest ache. Walt was there, his back to the camera, close enough that it felt invasive. Brent stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, rocking on his heels like he was bored. Marlene said, "I'm tired." Walt's voice came back low, coaxing. "Then let us handle it," he said. "Just sign. You can go back inside." Marlene didn't move. "I'm not signing," she said. Walt stepped closer. "Marlene," he said. And then his tone shifted into something I'd never heard from him before, something that made my skin crawl because it was so intimate and cruel. "You're going to die. And when you do, this land is going to be a mess. Do you want your name tied to that? Do you want everyone to know you left chaos behind?" Marlene's shoulders lifted slightly as she inhaled. "Get off my porch," she said. Brent spoke up, impatient. "Nobody's trying to hurt you," he said. "But if you keep acting like this, you're going to leave Claire with nothing. You understand that, right? She's not built for this." The way he said my name felt like a punch. Marlene's head turned, and for a second she looked straight toward the camera. Not at it, but in its direction. Like she knew something was watching. Like she wanted someone to see. "She's built for it," Marlene said. Walt's voice went cold. The video ended abruptly, like someone had walked up and pulled the camera down. I sat there in the dim light of my apartment, staring at my own reflection in the dark laptop screen. I could hear my breathing. Too fast. I could feel sweat on my palms. All my life, I'd believed my family was shallow and controlling, but not truly dangerous. Not the kind of people who would use welfare checks and evaluations and paperwork to corner an old woman. Not the kind of people who would weaponize concern to cut someone off from the one person who loved them. But the videos didn't care what I believed. They were real. They were time-stamped. They were proof. And now I understood why Walt had tried to make me sign that family agreement first. Because if he could get me to accept the funeral bill, accept responsibility on paper, accept the idea that I owed them something, he could frame the rest of it as me repaying a debt, my part, my fair share, my obligation. He wanted me bound before I even knew I held the keys. My phone buzzed on the desk, making me flinch. "Stop digging. You don't want to make this ugly. No signature. No name. Just the message." A second text came through immediately after. "We can tell when you're out there." My throat tightened. I stared at the words until they blurred, then forced myself to breathe. Cameras, doorbell footage, the gate, the signs, Earl's warning. Of course they could tell. They'd been building a little fortress around Marlene's place, and now they were using it like a leash. I should have been terrified. Part of me was. But another part of me, colder, clearer, felt something else rise in my chest. Anger. Yes. But also focus. Because they were making one mistake they didn't even realize they were making. They thought I was still the girl in the thrift store sweater who would shrink when they laughed. They thought I would back down because they said I was not built for this. They didn't know I spent my life reading contracts, finding violations, tracking timelines, documenting patterns, and building cases that held up when people swore they'd done nothing wrong. I opened Marlene's letter again and read the line about the lockbox at First Mountain Bank. Box 118. Key in my pocket. Original easement agreement. Revised trust addendum. I grabbed my coat and my car keys. It was late. But not too late for a bank's night depository lobby if it had one, or at least for me to be there first thing in the morning. I didn't know what Walt and Brent were planning next, but I knew this. If they were texting me threats now, it meant they were scared. And if they were scared, it meant whatever was in that lockbox could collapse their whole story. As I locked my apartment door behind me, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown message. Last chance. Sign the agreement. Pay the bill. Stay in your lane. I didn't respond. I just walked to my car, started the engine, and drove into the night with the cold certainty that the next time my family tried to corner me, I wouldn't be walking into their trap. I'd be bringing Marlene's proof with me. First Mountain Bank sat on the edge of downtown Marshall, a low brick building with bright lights and a parking lot that always looked half empty. I got there too late to do anything useful that night. The lobby doors were locked, the drive-through lanes dark, and the only sign of life was a single security camera angled toward the entrance like an unblinking eye. I sat in my car with the engine off, watching my own breath fog the windshield. The mountain air was colder than Charlotte's, and the quiet felt sharper out here. I kept checking my phone even though I knew no one was going to magically text me the solution. The last message from the unknown number sat on my screen like a stain. Last chance. Sign the agreement. Pay the bill. Stay in your lane. I didn't reply. I didn't even delete it. I just took a screenshot and saved it in a folder on my phone labeled Marlene. I didn't trust my anger. I trusted documentation. I slept in my car for maybe an hour, curled awkwardly in the driver's seat with my coat as a blanket, waking up every time headlights passed on the road. At 6:30, the sky was still gray, but the bank's lights flicked on inside and a woman in a navy cardigan unlocked the door. I waited until the clock on my dashboard read 8:01 before I walked up, because that was when the posted hours said they opened. And I didn't want anyone claiming I'd pushed or pressured or acted unstable. The lobby smelled like carpet shampoo and warm printer paper. A line of velvet ropes guided customers toward the teller windows even though there were only 3 people inside. A man in a construction jacket filled out a deposit slip at a stand. An older woman sat on a bench, holding a purse in both hands, like she was guarding it. I walked up to the reception counter and waited until a young teller looked up. "Hi," I said. My voice sounded too calm for how my body felt. "I need to access a safe deposit box." She smiled politely. "Sure. Do you have an account with us?" "It's not my account," I said. "It belonged to Marlene Parker. I'm the successor trustee of the Marlene Parker Conservation Trust. Her attorney is Halloway and Finch." The teller's smile tightened slightly. People got weird around the word trust, like it meant drama was coming. "Do you have identification?" she asked. I slid my driver's license across the counter. Then, after a beat, I pulled out the lockbox key from my pocket and placed it next to my ID. Her eyes flicked to the key. She picked up my license, typed something into her computer, and frowned lightly. "One moment," she said. "I'm going to get my manager." My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral. This was normal. This was procedure. It wasn't me being rejected. It was the world moving slowly in a way that made people like Walt think they could shove through it. A few minutes later, a man in a gray suit approached. He was in his 40s, clean-shaven, with a name tag that said, David Hensley, branch manager. He had the careful expression of someone who'd learned how to deliver bad news without raising his voice. "Miss Parker?" he asked. "Yes." He glanced at my ID, then at the key, then back at me. He led me into a small office with a glass wall and a desk that looked too new for the building. He gestured for me to sit. I sat, folding my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see them shake. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, and I could tell he'd said that line 1,000 times. "Thank you," I replied. He opened a file folder on his desk. "You're requesting access to safe deposit box 118 under Marlene Parker," he said. "Do you have documentation authorizing you as successor?" "I have the will," I said. "The attorney has the trust documents." Marlene left me the key and the box number in a letter. He nodded as if that made sense, then paused. "Miss Parker," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something before we proceed." I felt my shoulders go tight. "Okay. Have you been contacted by any other family members about this box?" he asked. My throat went dry. "Yes," I said, choosing my words. "My uncle and cousin have been pressuring me to sign documents, and I received some messages last night." Rated. I didn't add the word threatening. I let the fact speak. Mr. Hensley's mouth pressed into a thin line. He pulled out a paper from the folder and slid it across the desk toward me. "This is an access attempt record," he said. "2 days after Miss Parker passed, someone came in here with a death certificate copy and claimed they were handling her estate. They requested access to her safe deposit boxes." Safe deposit boxes. Plural. My stomach dropped. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. Mr. Hensley didn't answer directly. He tapped the paper. "We denied access," he said, "because the documentation was incomplete and the person requesting it was not listed on the signature card." Miss Parker was the only authorized user. He let that sit for a second, then added, "Miss Parker also placed a hold instruction on the box." "A hold?" I repeated. "Yes," he said, and he turned the file so I could see it. "She filed it last spring. It directs us that, upon her death, access is to be granted only to the person named in her successor documentation, and that if anyone else attempts access, we are to notify her attorney immediately." My mouth went slightly open. "She planned for this," I said, half to myself. Mr. Hensley nodded. "She was very clear," he said. "And she was concerned." Concerned. That word again. But this time, it wasn't a weapon. It was a warning. "Can I access the box?" I asked, forcing myself to stay steady. He held my gaze. "I can allow you to view the contents under supervised conditions today," he said, "but for removal of documents, we will need confirmation from her attorney or court appointment paperwork. That's standard." I exhaled slowly. "Fine," I said. "I'll call Mr. Halloway." I pulled my phone out and dialed. It rang twice before he picked up. "Miss Parker," he said. "I was about to call you." I'm at First Mountain Bank," I said. "Marlene left instructions for box 118. The manager says someone already tried to access it." There was a pause, just long enough that I could hear him processing. Then his voice turned sharper. "The manager didn't say," I replied. "But we both know. Don't remove anything without me or my written authorization," he said immediately. "I'm leaving my office now. Stay there. I'll email the bank confirmation while I'm en route." 2:10. I didn't tell him I'd slept in my car outside the building. I just said, "Okay." I hung up and looked at Mr. Hensley. "He's sending confirmation," I said. He nodded, and for the first time his expression softened into something like respect. "Miss Parker," he said, "I'm going to be frank. We see families do ugly things when money is involved. Your aunt, Miss Parker, made it very hard for anyone to do ugly things without leaving a trail." Go Tao. A strange, tight laugh threatened to rise in my throat, but I held it down. "That sounds like her," I said. Mr. Hensley stood and motioned for me to follow. He led me through a secure door into a quiet hallway that smelled faintly like metal and disinfectant. We stopped in front of a heavy vault door. He typed a code, turned a handle, and the vault opened with a low, solid click that made my heart beat faster. Inside, it was cool and dim, rows of small boxes lining the walls like silent mouths. He pulled out box 118 and carried it to a private viewing room with a small table. He set it down, then slid it toward me. "You may open it," he said. My fingers trembled as I inserted the key. The lock turned smoothly. The lid lifted. Inside were papers, neatly stacked, and a small sealed envelope with Halloway and Finch printed on it. There was also a thick folder labeled Conservation Easement Original, and beneath it, another labeled Trust Addendum Revised. There were 2 flash drives in a plastic sleeve, and there was a slim, black notebook with Marlene's handwriting on the front. Timeline. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I picked up the notebook first. It felt heavier than it looked, like it held more than paper. I opened it carefully. The first page was a list of dates. Each date had a short, blunt description next to it. March 12. Walt arrived unannounced. Brought papers. March 20. Kayla asked about Claire. Said she was a problem. April 2. Walt suggested evaluation. April 5. Doorbell camera installed without my consent. April 6. Locks changed. Key withheld. April 7. Claire turned away at door. Told. Doctor's orders. April 18. Welfare check threatened. May 1. Welfare check attempted. Officer advised. Claire is trusted contact. May 3. Earl held storage key for Claire. May 9. Bank hold filed. Box 118 locked down. May 15. Revised trust. Addendum signed and witnessed. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, forcing myself to keep reading even as my throat burned. This wasn't just a story in my head. It was a sequence. It was a map. It was the kind of thing I built for a living when someone tried to pretend a pattern was just coincidence. I flipped to the next pages. There were names, times, notes about conversations. There were references to videos and audio saved. There were short lines that cut like knives because of how calm they were. Walt said, "If you don't cooperate, you'll end up alone." Brent said, "We can call someone and make this official." Kayla said, "We'll tell them Claire is unstable. It'll stick." My stomach rolled. I looked up and realized Mr. Hensley had stepped back, giving me space. He wasn't reading. He was just standing near the door like a guard, letting me have this moment without an audience. I reached for the sealed envelope with the law firm's logo. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was suddenly very clear. Marlene had done more than leave me land. She had left me a case file. And if Walt and Brent had already tried to access this box, it meant they knew something was here that could destroy them, which meant the next move they made wouldn't be polite. It would be fast. It would be dirty. And for the first time since Marlene died, I felt something settle into my chest that wasn't grief or panic. It was readiness. I didn't open the sealed envelope in the bank viewing room. Not yet. I didn't trust myself not to react visibly, and I didn't trust the room not to have rules I didn't understand. I slid it back into the box, along with the notebook, and then I forced myself to take inventory like I was on a job site, checking compliance items one by one. 2 flash drives, original easement, revised trust addendum, timeline notebook, a small stack of printed emails clipped together, dates circled in pen, a folded sheet with phone numbers written down. Earls. Dr. Simmons. A name I didn't recognize, labeled Detective Services. And underneath it, County Clerk Madison. Marlene hadn't just been documenting. She'd been building a network, quietly, in the same way she built her land into something protected, patiently and with purpose. Mr. Hensley's computer pinged from outside the room. "Your attorney sent verification," he said, his tone professional again. "We can allow removal of documents today. You'll need to sign a receipt." I nodded, and the relief that hit me was sharp enough to make my eyes sting. I didn't want to leave this box behind like a treasure in a vault that someone else might try to steal later. I wanted it in my hands. Mr. Hensley slid a form across the table. I signed my name, slowly, carefully, like the act itself mattered. He handed me a bank-issued envelope to place the documents in. The paper was thick, the seal strip crisp. I packed the notebook, the trust addendum, the easement, the flash drives, and the printed emails, leaving the sealed law firm envelope inside for now because it was addressed to Halloway and Finch, not to me. As I closed the safe deposit box, the metal lid clicked shut with a finality that made my stomach twist. It felt like closing a door on Marlene's voice, but I reminded myself I wasn't losing it. I was carrying it. Back in the lobby, Mr. Hensley walked me to the exit. "Miss Parker," he said quietly, "I would advise you not to discuss what you removed here with anyone until your attorney tells you how to proceed." "I won't," I promised. He nodded, then hesitated like he was choosing whether to say what he was about to say. "One more thing," he said. "The person who attempted access to her boxes? He was angry when we denied him. He said some unkind things about you." My throat tightened. "What did he say?" Mr. Hensley's expression stayed polite, but his eyes sharpened. "He said you were just a niece and that you'd be put back in your place." A cold wave rolled through me. I forced a slow inhale. "Thank you for telling me," I said. He gave a small nod, and that was it. No drama, no reassurance. Just information. I walked out with the bank envelope tucked under my arm like a fragile package, even though the real fragility was in me. The drive back toward Asheville was a blur of winter bare trees and damp gray sky. My phone buzzed twice. I didn't look. I didn't want to see Walt's name, Brent's name, Kayla's name, or another unknown number taunting me. I kept both hands on the wheel and focused on the road. At the first safe opportunity, I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and sat there with my seatbelt still on. I opened the bank envelope and pulled out Marlene's timeline notebook again. I flipped to the page with May 15. Revised trust addendum signed and witnessed. The will had been executed in April. The addendum was from May. That meant Marlene had revised something after the family pressure escalated. After the locks changed. After I'd been turned away. After the welfare check attempt. She hadn't just left me her land. She'd actively protected it from the people who were circling it. I took my phone out and called Mr. Halloway again. He answered on the first ring. "I have it," I said, not bothering with hello. "Box 118. The addendum. The easement. Flash drives. A notebook. Everything." His exhale sounded like relief. "Good," he said. "Where are you?" "In a parking lot," I admitted. "Go somewhere secure," he said. "Not home if you think you're being watched. Can you come to my office?" I thought of Charlotte, of my apartment building with its shared hallway and predictable routines. I thought of the text. "We can tell when you're out there." I didn't know how literal that was, but I didn't want to test it. "I'm coming," I said. Halloway and Finch was in a building that looked like a renovated house, with a wraparound porch and a brass plaque by the door. When I arrived, it was just after noon. The receptionist looked up and recognized me immediately, her expression shifting into something sympathetic. "Mr. Halloway is waiting," she said, and buzzed me through. He met me in the hallway outside his office, face drawn, tie loosened slightly like he'd been moving fast. "Miss Parker," he said, and he didn't try to shake my hand this time. He just guided me inside and shut the door. His office smelled like old paper and faint cologne. A framed photograph of a mountain ridge hung on the wall, and a stack of client folders sat on a side table. He gestured for me to sit, then sat across from me, leaning forward. "You did the right thing going to the bank," he said. "I didn't sleep," I admitted, and the words sounded hollow. "I don't doubt it," he said, then nodded toward the envelope. "May I?" I slid it across to him. He opened it carefully and began laying items out on his desk with the same methodical precision he'd shown in the conference room. The easement, the addendum, the timeline notebook, the printed emails, the flash drives. When he saw the timeline notebook, his expression shifted. "She made her own record," he murmured. "She made everything," I said. My voice cracked slightly. "She knew." Mr. Halloway flipped through the notebook, eyes moving quickly, absorbing. His jaw tightened when he reached the pages with direct quotes. He set it down and picked up the printed emails. "These are between Walt and someone named Jennifer Crane," he said. "Do you recognize that name?" "No," I said. He scanned a line, then another. "She's a private care coordinator," he said. And he looked up at me. "Not a nurse, a care coordinator. That means she arranges services, sometimes evaluations, sometimes guardianship referrals. It's a service families use when they want to establish control." My stomach dropped. "So, the woman in scrubs, in the video, could have been anyone," he said. "Uniforms are easy." I felt sick. My hands clenched around the edge of the chair. "They were trying to get her declared incompetent," I said. Mr. Halloway didn't contradict me. He just nodded slowly. "It appears they were laying groundwork," he said. "And Marlene was laying counter-groundwork. A. He reached for the trust addendum and began reading it, his eyes narrowing slightly in concentration. Every few seconds, he made a small mark with a pen on the margin. The silence in the office felt heavy, broken only by the soft scratch of pen and the faint hum of a heater. Finally, he leaned back. "This is significant," he said. "What does it do?" I asked, my voice too quiet. He tapped the page. "It changes governance of the trust," he said. "It gives you full authority as successor, trustee, and adds protective clauses. It also triggers a conditional distribution fund, money set aside for family members, but only if they meet behavioral conditions." Behavioral conditions. My throat went tight. It was the same moral logic as the will in Story 1, but grounded in this world, in this asset. "What kind of conditions?" I asked. Mr. Halloway glanced at me. "Respectful interaction with you," he said. "No threats. No isolation attempts. No defamatory claims. No interference with your access to the property. And there's a clause about cooperation with the conservation easement, meaning no one can extract value in a way that violates environmental protections." I stared at him. "They disqualify themselves," he said, "if they lie about me." "They disqualify themselves," he repeated. "If they try to go around me." He nodded. Disqualify. A strange pressure built behind my eyes. I blinked fast, trying not to cry, because crying felt like letting them see me break even though they weren't in the room. "She did this for me," I said. "She did this," he replied, "because she knew what they would do to you." He picked up the easement document next. It was thick, with official seals and signatures. He flipped to a page near the back and pointed. "This conservation easement is recorded with the county," he said. "It restricts development, timber extraction, and mineral activities, and it names the trust as the enforcement entity. That means you have legal standing to stop actions that violate it." "Mineral," I said, the word tasting bitter. Mr. Halloway's eyes hardened. "Yes," he said. "This land has a potential lithium lease and possibly other mineral value. That's why Walt and Brent suddenly care. And that's why they were pushing her to sign away control. If they could take trustee authority, they could negotiate and profit within or around restrictions. So they were trying to take the steering wheel," I said. "Exactly," he said. "And now they don't have it." A knock sounded at the office door, soft but urgent. The receptionist peeked in, her face tense. "Mr. Halloway," she said. "There's someone here asking for you. He says it's an emergency." Mr. Holloway's eyes met mine. Who? He asked. The receptionist swallowed. Walt Parker, she said. And he's not alone. My stomach dropped as if I'd missed a step. Mr. Holloway stood up slowly, like he didn't want to give Walt the satisfaction of seeing him rush. Stay here, he told me. Do not engage. Whatever he wants, he can say it to me. I nodded, but my heartbeat kicked up again, loud in my ears. Through the closed door, I heard muffled voices in the hallway. Walt's voice, sharp and confident, and a second voice I didn't recognize, smoother, younger, Kayla's laugh, too light. Brent's low mutter. They'd come to the lawyer's office. They were escalating. And as I sat there with Marlene's proof spread across Mr. Holloway's desk, I understood that this was the moment my family would switch tactics because intimidation hadn't worked, shame hadn't worked, and now they were about to try something else. Something public, something legal-looking, something meant to make me look like the problem. I sat perfectly still while the voices outside the door sharpened. I couldn't make out every word, but I could hear the tone. Walt's tone was the one he used when he wanted to sound reasonable to strangers. Brent's was impatient, like he hated any situation he couldn't bulldoze through. Kayla's voice floated in and out like she was sprinkling sugar on poison. Then there was the new voice, the one I didn't recognize. It was confident and smooth, and it carried the faint impatience of someone used to being obeyed. Mr. Holloway opened the office door and stepped into the hallway without looking back at me. He left the door cracked, not wide open, but enough that I could see slivers of movement and hear more clearly. Walt stood near the reception desk with his hands clasped in front of him like a man at church. Brent leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Kayla stood beside him, phone in hand, still. And next to Walt was a tall man in a navy suit with a briefcase. His hair was dark, his smile sharp. He looked too polished for this building. Alexander? I heard Mr. Holloway say, and the name hit me like a cold slap. Not Alexander Rabe from Story 1, but this one had the same function, an external authority they were trying to weaponize. The man in the navy suit offered a hand. Grant Alexander, he said, and his voice was syrupy. Counsel for Mr. Parker. Counsel. Of course. Walt's eyes flicked toward the cracked door, and for a split second I saw the flash of satisfaction on his face. He knew I was close enough to hear. He wanted that. Mr. Holloway, Walt said, we need to correct a misunderstanding. Immediately, Mr. Holloway's voice stayed even. There's no misunderstanding, he said. There's a will, and there are trust documents. Grant Alexander smiled like he was amused. We've reviewed the situation, he said, and we believe there are serious concerns about undue influence and capacity. Capacity. My stomach clenched. They'd come with the exact weapon Marlene predicted. Walt nodded gravely, as if it pained him to say it. Marlene wasn't well, he said. We all know that. And Claire, he said my name like it was dirty, was very involved. Mr. Holloway's voice sharpened slightly. If you're making an allegation, make it clearly. Grant Alexander opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. We have affidavits, he said. Statements from family members that Marlene was confused, isolated, and subject to manipulation. I heard Kayla inhale as if on cue. We're not trying to be cruel, she said. We're trying to do what's right. Brent spoke up, louder. She bullied her, he said. Claire bullied Marlene into signing stuff. My hands clenched on the chair. The anger was hot, but beneath it was something colder. Recognition. They were doing exactly what Marlene wrote down. They were trying to make me unstable on paper, trying to make the whole situation look like an intervention. Mr. Holloway's voice went flat. You're wasting your time, he said. Marlene's capacity was verified. Multiple times. Grant Alexander's smile didn't change. We'll see what a judge thinks, he said. In the meantime, we're requesting an immediate injunction to prevent Miss Parker from taking any actions related to the trust assets until the matter is resolved. My chest tightened. An injunction. If they got one, they could freeze me out long enough to do damage. Mr. Holloway's reply was calm. You can request whatever you like, he said. But you don't get to bully my client with threats in my office. Walt's voice rose slightly, just enough to sound emotionally burdened. We're not threatening, he said. We're warning. Claire doesn't understand what she's gotten herself into. There are businesses involved, leases, agreements. Marlene's property is a mess. 8. Grant Alexander nodded. And if Miss Parker makes uninformed decisions, it could harm the value of the estate and affect multiple parties, he said. There it was. Value. Not grief. Not love. Not family. Mr. Holloway's tone didn't budge. If you want to file a petition, file it, he said. But you don't get to dictate terms here. Walt took a step forward. Then at least tell her to do the right thing, he said. Pay the funeral bill. That's a basic decency. My stomach flipped. Even now, they were trying to attach debt to my name. Mr. Holloway said, the funeral bill is between you and the funeral home. Miss Parker did not authorize it. And attempting to coerce her into paying it by withholding information is unwise. Grant Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you accusing my client of coercion? Mr. Holloway didn't blink. I'm describing what I witnessed, he said, and I'm advising you that I keep records. Kayla laughed softly, a little too high. Records, she echoed. You mean Claire's little notes? Something in me snapped. Not into violence, but into clarity. I stood up and walked to the cracked door. My legs felt steady now, like my body had decided it was done with shaking. I opened the door fully. The hallway fell silent. Walt's eyes widened just slightly. Then he forced his face into a look of wounded disappointment. Claire, he said, like he was relieved to see me. Thank God. Maybe you can finally listen. Whine. Grant Alexander's eyes flicked over me, assessing. Brent's jaw tightened. Kayla's smile became smoother. Practiced. I looked at them all. Then, at Mr. Holloway. I said you didn't have to, he replied, watching me carefully. I nodded once. I don't, I said. Then I looked back at Walt. But I'm not going to sit in a room while you lie about my aunt. Walt's eyebrows lifted. I held his gaze. You changed her locks, I said. You installed cameras. You threatened her with a welfare check. You tried to get her evaluated. You told people I was unstable. Kayla's smile tightened. That's not what happened, she said quickly. We were concerned. Grant Alexander's tone turned firm. Miss Parker, unless you have evidence, these are serious accusations. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gesture wildly. I just looked at him and said, I have evidence. It's God. Walt's face twitched, the smallest crack. Mr. Holloway stepped forward. This conversation is over, he said. If you want to communicate, you can do it through filings and written correspondence. Grant Alexander adjusted his grip on his folder. We will, he said, and we'll be seeking immediate relief. Walt leaned toward me and lowered his voice, but not enough. You're making a mistake, he said. You're going to lose everything. I stared at him. You mean I'm going to lose what you want? I said. His eyes hardened. You don't deserve it, he hissed. I felt my pulse in my throat, but I didn't flinch. Marlene didn't think so, I said. Brent pushed off the wall. Stop saying her name like you knew her better than we did, he snapped. I looked at him. For a second, the hallway went so still, I could hear the receptionist's computer fan whirring behind the desk. Kayla's phone buzzed once in her hand, and she silenced it without looking down. Grant Alexander cleared his throat. This is not productive, he said smoothly. Mr. Holloway, you'll receive our petition within 48 hours. Mr. Holloway nodded. I'll look forward to responding, he said. Walt turned to leave, but as he passed me, he paused. His face was close enough that I could smell his aftershave, the same one he'd worn my whole life. He spoke softly, so only I could hear. You think you have proof, he murmured, but proof can disappear. He stepped away like he hadn't said anything at all. Brent followed him, jaw clenched. Kayla gave me a small, sad smile like she was the victim, then turned and walked out with her phone pressed to her ear as soon as she hit the porch. Grant Alexander lingered a fraction longer, eyes on me. It's unfortunate, he said, tone mild, when grief gets turned into conflict. Then he left too. The door clicked shut behind them, and the quiet that followed felt like a vacuum. I stood there, my stomach churning. Mr. Holloway touched my elbow lightly. Are you all right? He asked. I nodded, but I wasn't sure it was true. He said, proof can disappear, I whispered. Mr. Holloway's eyes narrowed. Then, We treat it like it's already under threat, he said. We duplicate everything. We secure everything. And we move faster than they do. And court it. He guided me back into his office and shut the door. First, he said, we're going to back up those drives. Then we're going to file notice of your trustee authority with the county and the bank. And then, he paused, looking directly at me. We're going to prepare for the part where they try to make you look like the villain. I sat down slowly, my hands finally starting to tremble again now that the confrontation was over. How do we stop them? I asked. Mr. Holloway opened a drawer and pulled out a small device, an external hard drive. We stop them the way your aunt stopped them, he said. With documents, timelines, and consequences. As he began plugging in the flash drives, I realized something else that made my chest tighten. Walt hadn't come here just to threaten. He'd come to see what I had, to measure how prepared I was. And now that he knew I wasn't alone, he'd stop trying to intimidate me and start trying to outmaneuver me, which meant the next move wouldn't be a text or a petition. It would be something that hit my real life, my job, my reputation, my safety, because that was how Walt fought. He didn't swing fists. He pulled strings. We spent the next 2 hours turning Marlene's life into backups. Mr. Holloway plugged the first flash drive into his computer, then into the external hard drive, copying everything twice. He created a folder labeled Parker Trust Evidence, and then another labeled Parker Trust Working, separating raw files from anything we might edit or annotate later. He printed out a chain of custody form and had me sign it, then signed it himself. Every step was calm, deliberate, and maddeningly slow. But I understood why. If Walt and Brent were planning to fight dirty, then our defense couldn't have weak seams. While files transferred, Mr. Holloway read through the trust addendum again, marking certain clauses with yellow tabs. He explained in plain language what each one meant. Trustee authority, enforcement rights under the easement, conditional family distributions, non-interference requirements, defamation clauses. It was like watching a blueprint of Marlene's mind laid out in legal terms. She hadn't just tried to protect her property. She'd tried to protect me from being made into a scapegoat. When the second flash drive finished copying, Mr. Holloway leaned back and rubbed his eyes. All right, he said. Next step is filing. Filing where? I asked. County clerk, he said. We file notice of trustee succession and attach the relevant excerpts. That creates a public record that you are the acting authority. Then we notify the conservation easement holder, there's a land conservancy listed here, and we notify the bank and any parties with existing agreements. My stomach tightened. Does Walt get notified? He'll find out, Mr. Holloway said. He's already watching the situation. But the point is to make it harder for him to move money, file documents, or speak on behalf of the trust without it being obviously unauthorized. Jevond. I nodded. Okay. He looked at me over his glasses. Now, he said, I want you to tell me about your job. Specifically, does anyone in your workplace have reason to know about this trust? I hesitated. Not really, I said. My boss knows my aunt died because I took bereavement days. I didn't tell anyone details. Good, he said. Keep it that way. Do not discuss any of this at work, not even with a friend. If Walt's attorney tries to paint you as unstable or reckless, the last thing we need is office gossip. I swallowed. I've already gotten anonymous texts, I said. His jaw tightened. Save them. Screenshot them. I didn't, I said. He nodded once, then picked up his phone. I'm going to make a call, he said. There's a land conservancy named in this easement. They need to know immediately that you're the enforcement contact now. They will take unauthorized activity seriously. He stepped out of the office briefly. I sat alone for a moment, staring at the evidence files on his desk and the tabs sticking out of documents like little flags. My mind kept circling back to Walt's whisper. Proof can disappear. I didn't know what that meant in practice. Break-in? Theft? Deleting files? Destroying paper? Or something more subtle, making my credibility disappear by turning me into a story people wouldn't trust. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down and my stomach dropped. Unknown number. You're stealing from your own family. A second text arrived before I could breathe. We're calling your employer. My skin went cold. I stood up, walked to Mr. Holloway's desk, and placed my phone down on it with the screen lit, like I was putting a piece of evidence on a table in a crime show. When he came back in, he took one look, and his expression changed. "All right," he said quietly. "They're escalating on schedule." "On schedule?" I asked, my voice tight. He tapped Marlene's timeline notebook with his finger. "She wrote down their pattern," he said. "Control, isolate, shame, then threaten consequences. If they can't take the asset directly, they'll try to make you too distracted to protect it." I felt my throat tighten. "They can't call my employer," I said. "They don't have any proof of anything." "They don't need proof to cause problems," he replied. "They need a narrative." A soft knock sounded at the door. The receptionist peeked in. My stomach dropped. "Who?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable. "She didn't give a name," she said. "She said it was about your professional conduct." Professional conduct. My heart started hammering. Mr. Holloway held up a hand toward the receptionist. "Do not speak unless I ask you a direct question," he said. I nodded, my mouth dry. He picked up the phone on his desk and hit speaker. "This is Holloway," he said. A woman's voice filled the room, brisk and formal. "Hello," she said. "My name is Linda Suarez. I'm with Parker Environmental Compliance Services. I'm calling regarding Claire Parker." My stomach lurched. That was my company. Mr. Holloway's eyes narrowed. "I'm counsel for Miss Parker," he said. "How may I help you, Miss Suarez?" There was a pause, like the woman hadn't expected that. I apologize," she said. "I'm the HR manager. We received a call this morning from a man identifying himself as Walter Parker. He raised concerns that Miss Parker is involved in an ethical violation related to a client conflict and alleged misuse of confidential information." My hands went numb. "Walt. He did it. He actually did it." Mr. Holloway's voice stayed even. "Did he specify a client?" he asked. "He claimed," Linda Suarez said, "that Miss Parker has been using her position to interfere with land negotiations involving Madison County and that she has access to environmental permitting information she's using for personal gain." I felt heat rise up my neck. That was absurd. My company didn't even handle permitting negotiations. I audited compliance, not leases. But Walt didn't care about accuracy. He cared about sounding plausible. Mr. Holloway said, "Miss Parker's work involves regulated compliance audits. She is not involved in land negotiations of any kind. This call is retaliatory and tied to an estate dispute. I can provide documentation." Linda Suarez hesitated. "We're obligated to look into any complaint," she said carefully. "We're not accusing her of anything, but we wanted to notify her and request a meeting." Mr. Holloway asked, "Did Mr. Parker provide any evidence?" "No," Linda Suarez admitted. "He spoke generally." "Mr." Holloway's tone cooled. "Then you have a baseless allegation from a family member in the middle of a legal dispute," he said. "I would advise you to handle this as you would any potentially malicious complaint. Miss Parker will cooperate, but she will not do so without counsel present." There was another pause, longer this time. "Understood," Linda Suarez said. "I'm sorry to intrude. We have policies, but I can appreciate the context." Mr. Holloway replied, "I'll email you a letter summarizing this. Please retain it for your file. And please note that any further harassment by Mr. Parker will be documented." "Yes," Linda Suarez said. "Thank you." The call ended. For a second, the room went silent, except for the hum of the computer. I stared at Mr. Holloway. My voice came out thin. "He actually called." Mr. Holloway nodded. "That's why I asked about your job," he said. "He wants you frightened and defensive." 1. My hands trembled. "What if they believe him?" I asked. "They won't," he said, and his certainty calmed me slightly. "But even if they don't, it still costs you time and peace. That's the point." I sank into the chair, a dull ache spreading behind my ribs. I thought about my work, how careful I was, how obsessed I was with ethics and documentation. The idea that Walt could taint that with one phone call made me feel like someone had reached into my life and smeared mud across something I'd built with my own hands. Mr. Holloway opened his email and began typing. "We're going to send HR a letter immediately," he said. "And we're also going to send Walt's counsel a notice that any further defamatory claims trigger the disqualification clause." "Disqualification?" I repeated, and the word suddenly felt powerful. Mr. Halloway looked up. That clause is not a moral scolding, he said. It's a lever. It's consequences. I thought of Marlene's line. Pay for every time he shut you out. I felt the anger shift again, from helpless heat into something useful. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown message. We just want what's fair. Don't make us do this. I stared at it and felt my stomach turn, because they were already doing it. And they were going to keep doing it until someone stopped them. Mr. Halloway finished typing and hit send. Then he turned his monitor slightly toward me. Now, he said, we need to do something your family won't expect. What? I asked. He tapped the conservation easement document. We bring in third parties, he said. We bring in the Land Conservancy, the county clerk, and if necessary, law enforcement. Because once this stops being a private family drama and becomes a matter of public record and regulatory enforcement, Walt loses his favorite advantage control in the shadows. My throat tightened. He'll hate that, I said. Mr. Halloway's eyes held mine. Good, he said. Let him hate it. He doesn't get to threaten your livelihood while pretending he's protecting his sister's legacy. He slid a business card across the desk. It had a name on it. Tessa Mulvaney, Easement Stewardship Director, Blue Ridge Land Conservancy. I spoke to her, Mr. Halloway said. She wants to meet you tomorrow morning. My pulse jumped. On the property? I repeated. Yes, he said, and she's bringing a site inspector. If Walt has been tampering with anything, installing unauthorized cameras, moving boundary markers, contacting lease brokers, she'll document it. Officially, I thought of the gate, the cameras, the opened box in the barn. I thought of Walt's confidence, of Brent's hunger, of Kayla's phone raised like a weapon. Tomorrow morning, we were going back to Marlene's land, but not as sneaking nieces or scared women. We were going as the legal authority and the enforcement partner, with paperwork and witnesses. And I knew that when Walt realized he couldn't intimidate me in private anymore, his mask would crack in public. That crack was going to be my opening. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm because my body didn't trust sleep anymore. I showered, dressed in jeans and boots, and pulled my hair into a tight knot that made my scalp ache. I drank coffee I barely tasted. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from unknown numbers overnight and a voicemail that I didn't open. I didn't want to hear Walt's voice in my kitchen. I wanted my brain clear. By 7:30, I was driving back toward Madison County with a printed copy of the trust addendum in my passenger seat and Mr. Halloway's business card tucked in my wallet like a talisman. The road climbed into the mountains, fog hugging the lower valleys. The air looked damp, the kind that makes everything smell like wet leaves. I met Tessa Mulvaney and her inspector at a small pull-off near the county line, just like Mr. Halloway instructed. Tessa arrived in a dark green SUV with a Blue Ridge Land Conservancy logo on the door. She stepped out wearing hiking boots and a fleece jacket, her hair pulled back, her posture alert. The inspector, a man named Luis, got out of the passenger side carrying a tablet and a bright orange field notebook. Tessa shook my hand firmly. Claire Parker? She asked. Yes, I said. I'm sorry about Marlene, she said, and her voice held the kind of respect that didn't feel performative. She was sharp. She didn't miss details. That sounds like her, I said, and my throat tightened. Tessa nodded toward the printed documents in my hand. You brought the addendum? She asked. I handed it to her. She scanned the first page, then looked up. Okay, she said simply. Let's do this correctly. Do. We drove in a short line, my car behind hers, until we reached the road where Earl lived. I parked by his place like last time, because the gate at Marlene's driveway was still locked and still posted with that shiny no trespassing sign. Tessa took one look at it from the roadside, and her expression hardened. That sign isn't approved, she said. Luis made a note in his orange notebook without being asked. We walked in along the access path Earl had shown me, and I felt my nerves spike with every step, even though I wasn't alone. It's strange how your body remembers fear. The woods were quiet, the ground soft under our boots, and the air smelled like pine and damp soil. But my heart still pounded like I was breaking the law. When we reached the barn, Luis stopped and looked up at the corner where Earl said a camera had been installed. Sure enough, there was a small black device mounted under the eave, angled toward the clearing. It was subtle, but not subtle enough for someone trained to look. That's new, Luis said. Tessa's jaw tightened. That's a violation, she said. Any installations that affect the property's conservation restrictions, access, or monitoring must be disclosed. I stared at the camera and felt a weird mix of anger and relief. The anger was obvious. The relief came from having someone else see it and call it what it was, without me having to beg to be believed. Luis took photos from multiple angles. He logged the coordinates on his tablet. He narrated quietly as he worked, the way inspectors do when they're creating a record. Unauthorized surveillance device, mounted without permit, likely installed after easement execution. Tessa turned to me. Do you know who installed it? She asked. I'm not sure, I said. But my uncle admitted he put cameras up for safety. She nodded, eyes sharp. We'll document the impact regardless, she said. Intent is secondary. We moved toward the farmhouse next. The front porch looked exactly like it had in the videos. The swing, the quilt folded over the rail, the old rocking chair. But there was a new doorbell camera by the frame, glossy and black. It felt like an intruder wearing a polite face. Luis photographed that too. Tessa stepped onto the porch and looked at the deadbolt on the front door. Do you have a key? She asked. I hesitated, then pulled out the key ring from Marlene's file cabinet, the one labeled house. My fingers felt clumsy as I slid the key into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again. Slower. Still nothing. My stomach dropped. He changed them again, I whispered. Tessa's eyes narrowed. Recently, she said, glancing at the lock. This hardware is brand new. Luis wrote something down, the pen scratching quickly. I stood there on Marlene's porch, staring at a lock that no longer recognized the key Marlene had left for me. It felt like being erased all over again, like the land itself was being used against me. Tessa turned toward the yard, scanning the clearing. We don't need to enter the house to document violations, she said, and her voice was steady, practical. But I want to note this as interference with trustee access. Interference, a legal word, a word that meant something. We walked around the property boundary next, checking markers, photographing fence lines. Luis moved with trained efficiency, pausing to take measurements, verifying locations against the easement map on his tablet. Tessa stayed close, occasionally pointing out features buffer zones near the creek, areas where timber restrictions applied, spots where any mineral activity would be tightly controlled. At one point, Luis stopped near a stand of trees and frowned. These stakes are fresh, he said. I looked. There were wooden stakes with bright pink ribbon tied around them, hammered into the ground in a rough line. They hadn't been there before. They looked like the kind surveyors use as temporary markers. Tessa crouched and touched one. New survey activity, she said. Her voice went colder. Did Marlene authorize a new survey? No, I said. She hated strangers on the land. She would have told me. Luis took photos. This suggests planning, he said. Tessa stood up and looked toward the road. If someone is preparing for lease negotiations or development, she said, they may be trying to establish lines, access points, or resource estimates. I felt my stomach twist. Mineral? I said again. Tessa nodded. Likely, she replied. And if they're doing it without trustee authorization, it's a serious issue. We were halfway back toward the barn when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Then a third time in quick succession, like someone was calling repeatedly. Tessa glanced at me. You should check, she said. In case it's your attorney. I pulled my phone out and saw the caller ID. Mom, I answered, already bracing. Mom? I said. Her voice came out, rushed and panicked. Claire, she whispered. Walt is on his way out there. He's furious. He says you brought outsiders onto the land. He says you're trespassing. I felt my pulse jump. He doesn't get to decide that, I said, keeping my voice low. He's saying he's calling the sheriff, my mother said. He's saying he's going to have you removed. Tessa's eyes sharpened as she listened. Luis stopped walking, already ready, like this wasn't his first time dealing with angry landowners. Let him call, Tessa said quietly, close to my shoulder, and there was no fear in her voice. Just certainty. I swallowed. Mom, I said, did you tell him where I was? There was a pause. Too long. I didn't mean to, she said, voice cracking. He came to my house this morning. He had papers. He said he was going to sue me if I didn't cooperate. He said I could be liable for aiding you. A hot wave of anger rose in my chest. He threatened you, I said. He's your uncle, she whispered, like that was supposed to soften it. He's a bully, I said. And I surprised myself with how flat my voice sounded. My mother started to cry softly. Claire, please, she said. Just leave. I can't handle him. My throat tightened. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hang up. Instead, I took a slow breath and said, Go inside and lock your door. Don't answer if he comes back. If he threatens you again, tell him to put it in writing. She sniffed. Okay, she whispered. I ended the call and looked at Tessa. He's coming, I said. Tessa nodded. Then he can explain why there are fresh survey stakes on conserved land without authorization. Luis tapped his tablet. We walked back toward the clearing, and my nerves spiked, but this time there was something else under them, a sense of structure. Witnesses. Documentation. An official organization. Walt couldn't spin this as Claire being emotional if a conservancy inspector was standing beside me with a GPS pin and a report. A truck engine roared in the distance, loud enough to carry through the trees. Tires hit gravel hard, not slowing. Then Walt's voice echoed across the clearing before I even saw him. Claire! He came into view near the gate line, striding fast, face flushed, phone in his hand. Brent followed a few steps behind, jaw clenched. Kayla was there too, filming with her phone held up at chest level like she'd been waiting for the shot. Walt pointed at me like I was a criminal. Get off this property, he shouted. You are not authorized to be here. Tessa stepped forward, calm as a judge. Actually, she said, loud enough to carry, she is the acting trustee, and I'm here representing the Blue Ridge Land Conservancy. We have documented multiple violations this morning. Walt's face shifted, the confidence flickering. Who the hell are you? He snapped. Tessa didn't flinch. She pulled out her ID badge and held it up. Tessa Mulvaney, she said, Easement Stewardship Director. Kayla's phone zoomed in on her badge. I could tell by the way she adjusted her grip. Her eyes were bright with the thrill of a public scene. Walt's tone changed instantly, smoothing into the version of himself he saved for strangers. Oh, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Well, then you understand. My sister is dead. We're trying to protect her legacy, and my niece is... She is the trustee, Tessa cut in. And there are unauthorized survey stakes on protected land. Walt's smile froze. Survey stakes? He repeated, too quickly. Brent stepped forward. That's nothing, he said. We were just... checking boundaries. Luis raised his tablet slightly. Checking boundaries requires authorization, he said evenly. And we have documentation of fresh markings, unauthorized cameras, and access interference. Yes. Walt's eyes darted toward the barn corner camera, then back to me. And for the first time, I saw something like panic flash across his face. Because this wasn't a family argument anymore. This was an official report, being written in real time. And the mask he'd worn so easily in private was about to crack in public. Walt recovered quickly, the way people do when they've spent their whole lives talking themselves out of consequences. He took a slow breath, rolled his shoulders back, and put on that practiced face of concern again. Look, he said, spreading his hands like he was trying to calm the situation. This is getting blown out of proportion. We've been dealing with a lot. Marlene passed, and we're trying to make sure her property isn't vulnerable. That's all. Kayla kept filming, her phone steady. Brent hovered behind Walt, eyes narrowed, jaw working like he was chewing anger. I could feel the tension in my own body, but having Tessa and Luis standing beside me changed everything. It wasn't just me against them. It was documentation against denial. Tessa didn't raise her voice. Mr. Parker, she said. You can frame it however you want. The easement doesn't care about framing. Unauthorized installations and unauthorized survey activity are violations. We'll be filing a report. End quote. Walt's eyes flicked to me. Claire, he said, softer now, like he was trying to make it personal. Honey, you don't want to do this. You don't want to turn your aunt's land into a battlefield. The word honey made my skin crawl. He hadn't called me that since I was a kid, and he'd only ever used it when he wanted to make me feel small. I kept my voice even. You turned it into a battlefield, I said. You changed the locks. You put up cameras. You tried to get her evaluated. You told people I was unstable. Walt's face tightened. That's a lie, he snapped, then caught himself and forced calm again. That's grief talking. Tessa glanced at Luis. Luis tapped his tablet and said, "We have the lock changes documented by hardware type and install condition, and we have photos of the cameras with timestamps and GPS points." Walt's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes moved fast, scanning for a new angle. "We can take the cameras down," he said quickly. "Fine. No problem. We'll cooperate." Brent stepped forward, voice sharp. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We're not criminals. We're family." Luis didn't react. "I didn't say you were criminals," he said. "I said these are violations." Kayla's phone tilted toward me. "Claire," she said sweetly, "tell them why you're really doing this. You want attention. You want to punish everyone because you felt left out." I looked at her and felt something settle in my chest. Not rage, not fear. A hard, quiet certainty. "I'm doing this," I said, "because my aunt asked me to protect what she built." Walt scoffed, louder than he meant to. "She didn't build anything," he said. "She inherited it. And now you're going to ruin it because you think you're some kind of hero." Tessa turned slightly toward him. "Marlene Parker was one of the most committed landowners we've worked with," she said. "She built conservation value. She built compliance. That's not nothing." 18. Walt's face flashed red. The mask slipped for a second. "You don't know her," he snapped at Tessa. Tessa held his gaze without blinking. "I knew enough to know she prepared for this," she said. That landed. I saw it in the way Walt's eyes flickered, in the way his jaw tightened. Prepared for this. He hated that. He hated the idea that Marlene had outplanned him. He shifted his stance, angling his body toward me again. "Claire," he said, lowering his voice, trying to pull me into a private bubble even though we were standing in the open. "We can settle this quietly. You don't have to do it like this." I almost laughed, but it would have sounded like a crack. Instead I said, "Quietly is how you tried to trap me." Walt's eyes hardened. "You think you're smart," he said. "You think you have power, but you're going to learn the hard way what happens when you embarrass people." Growls. Tessa stepped closer, her tone firm now. "Mr. Parker," she said, "I need you to stop threatening the trustee." Walt threw his hands up. "Threatening?" he said loudly. "I'm warning my niece." That's what family does. Then we heard another vehicle on gravel. Slower this time. Deliberate. A sheriff's cruiser rolled into the clearing and stopped near the gate line. Walt's shoulders eased instantly, like backup had arrived. Kayla's phone lifted higher. Thrilled. A deputy stepped out, not in a rush, hand resting casually near his belt. He looked at Walt first, then at me, then at Tessa and Luis. His expression was tired, like he'd dealt with too many family fights over fences and wills. "Mornin'," he said. "We got a call about trespassing." Walt stepped forward, voice smooth again. "Deputy," he said. "Thank you. My niece is on the property with strangers. She's causing a disturbance. I want her removed." The deputy's eyes flicked to me. "Ma'am?" he said. "Is this your property?" I took the printed trust addendum from my jacket pocket and held it out. My hand shook slightly, but I didn't let it drop. "I'm the acting trustee of the Marlene Parker Conservation Trust," I said. "This property is held by the trust. Here is documentation." The deputy took it, scanned the first page, then looked up at Tessa. "And you are?" he asked. "Tessa Mulvaney," she said, holding up her badge. "Blue Ridge Land Conservancy. We're here under the conservation easement to document violations and verify compliance." Luis showed his tablet screen briefly, the easement map visible. The deputy's posture changed. He straightened a little, his attention shifting away from Walt's performance and toward the paperwork. "All right," he said. He handed the addendum back to me. "So you have authority to be here." Walt's face tightened. "Deputy," he said, voice strained, "that document is contested. We're filing a petition. She's not supposed to be making decisions." The deputy's tone stayed neutral. "That's a civil matter," he said. "Unless there's a court order, I'm not removing someone who has documentation showing authority." Kayla's lips parted in disbelief. Brent muttered something under his breath. Walt's eyes went dark. "But," the deputy continued, "I will say this. If there's harassment or threats, that's a separate issue. Everybody needs to keep it calm." Walt forced a smile. "Of course," he said through clenched teeth. Tessa said, "Deputy, we would like to note unauthorized surveillance devices and survey markers that appear recently installed." The deputy glanced at Walt. "That true?" he asked. Walt's smile twitched. "We were just making sure boundaries were clear," he said. "It's responsible." Luis spoke calmly. "Boundary clarification is not the same as a formal survey," he said. "And easement terms require trustee authorization for activities that suggest development or extraction planning." The deputy looked between them. "Okay," he said. "Then I'm going to suggest you all take this through the proper channels." "Ma'am," he said to me, "if you want to file a report about threats or harassment, you can." I nodded. "I do," I said, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded. Walt's head snapped toward me. "Claire," he hissed. I looked at him. "You called my employer," I said. "You texted me threats. You changed locks on property you didn't own. You tried to access a bank box you weren't authorized to access." "I'm done pretending that's normal." The clearing went quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. Kayla's phone wavered slightly, like she hadn't expected me to say it out loud in front of a deputy and a conservancy director. Walt's face went red. "You're making yourself look insane," he spat. Tessa's voice cut cleanly through the tension. "We'll be submitting our report today," she said, looking at Walt. "And if any extraction, surveying, leasing, or development activity occurs without trustee authorization, we will request immediate enforcement action." Brent stepped forward like he couldn't help himself. "You can't do that," he said. I felt my jaw clench. "It's trust property," I corrected. "And you lost the right to call it family the minute you tried to use the law to lock Marlene out of her own decisions." Walt's eyes locked on me, and for the first time I saw something close to hatred. Not disappointment. Not pity. Hatred. Because he couldn't control the room anymore. The deputy cleared his throat. "All right," he said. "Mr. Parker, I'm going to ask you to leave for now. Let them finish what they're doing." Walt laughed, a harsh sound. "Leave?" he repeated. "This is my sister's land." The deputy didn't budge. "Sir," he said firmer, "leave. If you don't, you're the one causing a disturbance." Kayla's phone stayed up, but her face tightened. Brent's hands flexed at his sides. Walt's chest rose and fell quickly. For a second, I thought he might do something reckless. Instead, he leaned toward me, just close enough that only I would hear, and his voice dropped into a quiet, vicious whisper. "You think you won," he said, "but you're going to regret this." Then he stepped back, plastered a fake smile on his face, and walked toward his truck with Brent and Kayla trailing behind. As their tires crunched away down the gravel, the air in my lungs finally loosened. My legs felt weak with delayed adrenaline. Tessa turned to me. "You did well," she said simply. Luis nodded. "We've got what we need," he said. "This report will carry weight." The deputy glanced at me. "If you want to file harassment reports, do it sooner rather than later," he said, "and keep saving those messages." "I will," I said. When he left, the clearing fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not the quiet of being shut out, the quiet of being seen. Tessa and Luis finished their documentation, then promised they'd email Mr. Holloway the report by end of day. When they drove off, I stood alone for a moment in front of Marlene's locked front door, staring at the new hardware that didn't recognize her key. I pulled the keyring from my pocket and held the house key in my palm. It felt suddenly symbolic in a way I didn't want. Like Marlene had left me access, and Walt had tried to erase it. But now I understood something. The lock wasn't the point. The house wasn't the point. The gate and cameras and survey stakes weren't the point. The point was that Walt had finally done it in front of witnesses. He'd made threats. He'd lied. He'd tried to weaponize authority. And now there would be a report with his name tied to it. Timestamps and GPS pins and photos that didn't care about his family status. As I walked back into the tree line toward Earl's access path, my phone buzzed one more time. I glanced down and saw a new message from an unknown number. "You just triggered the clause." I stopped walking. My pulse kicked up again, but not with fear this time. Because whoever sent that message wasn't threatening me. They were warning me that Marlene's trap had finally snapped shut, and everything my family thought they could take was about to slip out of their hands.